Inside at last.
Welcome, fellow Teffers, to Inside at Last, the one and only thief dedicated podcast. And we start the new season in 2023 with another gem. Last season we ended with someone from the community coming into the games industry, Dana Nightingale. And we start the new season with someone from the community coming into the games industry. And it's none other than RAEN or David Riegel. Welcome and thanks for joining us today.
Hey, I'm very excited to be here, so thanks for having me.
Yeah, we are too. And as always, I'm not alone. I have my two co-hosts, and this time it's none other than the brother brethren. Mike, welcome, and for the third time, I think.
Yep, that's right.
And also, I think he doesn't need any introduction. It's Random Teffer, or Rob, as we will call him today. Also, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here for this episode in particular.
Yeah, I think, David, maybe before we start, do you want to give a little introduction of who you are, where you're coming from, and what are you doing today, roughly?
Sure. So I'm David, and if you don't know who I am, I started in the Thief community as RAEN. I started modding quite a long time ago, probably about 20 years ago. I worked on Cult of the Resurrection, the Inverted Manse, and T2X. My first professional job in the industry was at Iron Storm Austin, working primarily on Thief 3. I've worked at a number of places after that, including 3D Realms. I ran a small work-for-hire studio for a few years called Triptych Games. I worked at Hangar 13 at 2K for about 8 years, and I'm currently at an unannounced startup working on a new AAA game.
Yeah, I think that was a long journey in a very short description. And of course, we will focus on your work on Thief. So the segments are your Thief FMs, basically the Inverted Mans. Then we will, of course, talk about, I would say, the elephant in the room, Thief 2X, one of the biggest fan projects ever made for Thief. And of course, your work on Thief Deadly Shadows, I think, will be also very interesting for the Teffers. But before we jump into that, please, as every new guest has to do, please tell us when and how did you stumble upon Thief and why did you fall in love with it?
Yes, I don't get to talk about Thief enough. So Thief, I think even after all this time, Thief 1 is still probably my favorite game. And interestingly enough, I didn't love it the first time I played it. I was living with my parents at the time and playing computer games on an old PC in a very bright office with speakers, and I think it was just the wrong setting for that kind of game. So I played it and I liked it quite a lot, but I think it wasn't the right atmosphere. And about a year later, I graduated from college, and I took my first job was teaching English overseas, teaching English as a second language in Shanghai. And I got over there, and we were in a very crowded part of the city, very urban, like a lot of street markets, and it was very different, I guess, from the environment that I was used to coming from. And back then, this was about 1999. Back then, it was very difficult to find any kind of legitimate entertainment media in China. It was very interesting. Like, you'd go down the street, and there'd just be stores and stores with VCDs and DVDs and games that were all bootleg or not the real versions or strange or dubbed unofficially or etc. And I couldn't even find it at the time. Like, I had a small laptop with me, and I was looking for some new games to play because I didn't bring any with me. And I couldn't find any real game stores down there. So I remember walking into this really small store, like on this crowded street front, and there were just walls and walls of games for the PC games stretching back for years. And the box for Thief Gold caught my eye, and I bought it at the time for 10 yuan, which is about, I think at the time it was about $1.30 in U.S. currency. And I brought it back, and I just fell in love with Thief at that time because I was teaching English during the day, but the nights were pretty quiet, and so uh, it was I played it kind of in darkness with headphones and in isolation, and it was really overwhelming. It was really the best experience that I'd had gaming, I think, at the time. And that's really when I fell in love with it. And I think after I came back to the States a year after that, I think I bought it again and really got into the community scene a bit more. I started doing drama. I think I actually made Cult of the Resurrection my last few months in China when I was over there, just learning the editor and diving into the community forums and so forth. So by the time I came back, I think I was really hooked on the franchise, and I was really well into the community at that point. When I came back, that's when I got into the Inverted Manse and Thief 2X, and that's all there is to it. I was hooked after that.
So stumbling upon Thief or rediscovering it in Shanghai is actually a new thing. So that's very cool.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, it was.
sorry, go on, please.
Go No, go ahead.
So that was the start, and could you maybe describe how the journey went on? Yeah, you just said the inverted mans, of course, was a huge thing. But yeah. What else is your story maybe up to today? Like maybe you can expand on that a bit.
You mean Beyond Thief or just moving up through Thief 3?
What interests me is like, okay, I wasn't clear. I'm sorry. So you were into this modding for Thief,
Mhm.
and how did you then later come into the games industry? That's the story I think would be very interesting.
Ah, um, well, I think my background was really in English and psychology, and I didn't have any practical tech skills. So when I got back from China, I'd always assumed that I would get a job teaching and write in my spare time. I never really thought about game development. Back then, there weren't very many game colleges the way there are today. Like nowadays, you can go to school specifically for game coding or game design, and it's much you have a much more direct path to get into the game industry. But back then, it was just kind of a passion, like a lot of people who love games. Like I think modding is kind of the next step to expressing your interest in the games that you love. So back then, I moved back in with my parents after I got back and started looking for a job. And I had, for the first few months, I had trouble finding one because I had a strange, I guess, background. There wasn't a lot of um, uh, prospects for like an English major back then. But I'd heard that big news in the gaming industry was that Warren Spector was putting together a team to work on Thief 3. And very boldly, I think I searched out his email address on the internet, and I just sent him an email with my resume and said, I'm a big Thief fan. Would you consider hiring someone from the community? These are the projects that I've worked on. Here's my resume. And of course, he politely turned me down at first, and I was just very persistent. I think at the time because Thief was still I was still very heavily into modding and still spending a lot of time on it. So every time I did something new, like a new mission like the Inverted Mans, or we had a new development in Thief 2X, I'd email him again and say, hey, like I've done a bunch more work. Would you consider hiring me now? And eventually, I think I just annoyed him to the point where he said, all right, we'll give you an interview. And I don't remember the first person I talked to. It might have been Lulu Lemaire or one of the other producers who called me at that time, and just did an initial interview. I ended up doing, I think, 4 or 5 phone interviews with various people on the team, and eventually they flew me down there, and I had an in-person interview, and then they hired me. And the whole process took, I think, about uh, probably 8 or 9 months altogether. It was quite a long time, but I was very, very fortunate. In spite of my inexperience and kind of boldness in the community, they decided to take a chance and hire me, and now I get to do it for a living, and that's how it started.
That's really cool. What I like is, so if I got it right, you basically came to Iron Storm or that division when they were still, yeah, of course, working on Thief 3. So it was all, yeah, pretty great there, I would say. Was it the good times of Iron Storm?
I came in during the late phase of pre-production,
Okay.
so it was when things were still being planned out, and things were rolling onto actually building the game.
Because Dana Nightingale, she told us that she was also in contact with Ironstorm and wanted to join there, but that was like, when Ironstorm was going down, basically, and she was trying to get in, and she didn't know that maybe it's not the best time. Um, yeah, but that's really nice, because I think that's such an amazing idea of someone from the community actually working on a Thief game, on an original one.
Can't imagine what that would look like. Like you've been loving Thief and modding Thief and working mostly by yourself and talking to people just on the internet and trading files back and forth. Moving from that to, I'm assuming you moved there and you were going into the office every day with a bunch of like professional developers. It must have been like that must have been incredible, just like an incredible change.
It was a crazy time. It was chaotic for a number of reasons. I uh, moved across the country. Ironstorm was very generous that they helped pay for my move, but unfortunately the movers took like 3 weeks to get my stuff in after a number of screw ups. Uh, so I was living like in a bare apartment, I think, for like
Oh
three
man.
weeks. Shortly after that, my wife, who was then my girlfriend, moved in with me, and it was the first time I'd ever lived with anybody else before, and that was kind of a big change. And then we had kind of a crazy development cycle, so I was spending a ton of time at the office. It was just extremely chaotic going in, but I loved doing it. It was very intimidating going in with all these very experienced designers on a project like this. So it was nuts.
I can imagine, or I can't imagine, but yeah, as Rob just said, that must be a crazy feeling. Um, so, but before we talk about details on Thief Deadly Shadows and your work there, I think we go way back to your first noticeable missions you provided to the community. And I think you started with the Cult of Resurrection, if I remembered correctly, right? That was before the Inverted Mans, correct?
Yeah, that was my first Thief community mission.
Um, because I think we start with the first question from one of the community members, the Bull, because
Mhm.
he wanted to know, what did you learn from creating Cult of Resurrection that you implemented in Inverted Mans?
I think I largely learned how not to do things. I think Cult of the Resurrection, I still, even after all this time, I think primarily consider myself a storyteller in the way I approach design. And Cult of the Resurrection, I just had this idea. The premise of the mission is that there's a secret cult, a secret pagan cult who's trying to bring Constantine back to life, and you have to go and stop them before they can complete this ritual. And I thought that was a cool idea, but everything about the creation of the mission was largely a learning process. And so it was really learning like how to construct a level, how to set up stealth scenarios, and then of course technically how to do some of the puzzle elements and reactions in the map. So it was a big learning experience all the way around, just putting all that stuff together.
I was
Um,
actually playing it a little bit the other night just as a bit of a refresher because it had been a while, and I noticed right away that that like the goals were so uh, different than what you might get in a standard thief mission that's made now, where it's instantly right away. I think two goals are to kill this person and kill that person. I thought that was really interesting because I've done similar things as well in my early building too, but I thought that was funny.
what I felt
Yeah,
was, I'm sorry, please go on.
I'm sure I did a lot of those things wrong. I didn't appreciate, I think the systemic, like open-ended nature of Thief the way that I did much later on. So I'm sure I had some of those objectives, which I probably would not have done much if I had built it later on.
Yeah, you
Isn't
don't
that
see too many
always the
kill this AI objective anymore. Not many people do that.
I did
But
it in my early. I did it in my early work too. Like
It's not
I think
it's not wrong. I mean, it's there.
No,
You
no.
can do it, but
Yeah.
it's just you don't see it much.
But isn't that always the case with art? When you do something that you always in backside, you think, oh, I could have done this like that, and maybe I should have done this way. But at that time, maybe it was the thing you could do, maybe from the skills or what you wanted to do. So, isn't that always the case? Like, general question, because we have two creators here.
Sure. I think every time you work on something, it's always a learning experience, and whenever you stop learning, is when you die creatively. So every time that you do a new project, you should always be, I think, searching for ways to improve and reach that next level and do something different.
Yeah.
And what I felt is that, of course, I replayed the missions as well for research for this episode. And what I felt like that Cult of Resurrection, and then when you instantly play Inverted Manse after that, it feels like, oh yeah, this is the real version. Like, you know, the Cult of Resurrection felt like you tried things out and you were getting used to everything. And the Inverted Manse felt like, okay, now you know your tools and now you know what to do, because this was such a huge jump. And I think it was within a year, or wasn't it?
It was pretty quick. I probably within a year and a half. Yeah.
Um, so what I in general discovered is, or that's my feeling, that you always tried to implement things and maybe have new approaches. For example, when it comes to weapons or stuff, is that something you were aiming for, or that was really important for you to to expand the universe and the tools people could use?
Yeah, I think back in those early days, I loved experimenting with the tools and figuring out what was possible. And I think I approach it from both directions, like both from kind of a top level design where I wanted to have some new gameplay possibilities for the player, but also kind of the other way around where working within the tools, you discover something interesting that you could alter and throw it in the game because as a modder, why not? You can put those kind of things in to alter the core experience a little bit, and it's kind of fun for people to play something different.
And yeah, I have a question following that. That was actually on the question catalog. In Inverted Manse, the player had different arrows than usual, like mud arrows, holy water, wind arrow,
Mhm.
etc. And most
Mhm.
of them serve a similar purpose, like the moss arrows, water arrows, and some specific or maybe slightly increased purpose. What was the reason to put those arrows in? Was it like the challenge to put them in, and to say they are there because I can, or is it like something else?
At the
Is it
time,
like challenging yourself?
uh, that was part of it. Yeah, it had kind of a dual purpose. Part of it was that I wanted to be able to create very challenging stealth environments, and the tools were similar but more powerful than some of the existing arrows that you had. So, for example, the wind arrows, you could put out multiple torches, and I thought that was kind of cool because it meant I could put more torches in a room and also kind of encourage players to line them up and use those kind of arrows creatively. So not a huge difference from the core gameplay, but that brings me to the other part, which is that I wanted to see what was possible with the arrows because I was also working on Thief2X at the time, and we were putting together new arrows for that game, and it was a big learning experience. Trying to create these arrows for the Inverted Manse, which were a little bit different and a little bit more powerful versus the arrows that we ended up with in T2X, which is kind of the next step where they had entirely different functions.
Um, and I just had a question on my mind, but yeah. Um, and do you remember how was the reception of the community, like for those changes or these additions? I would say, because the normal stuff was also there, but was there some reaction to it?
For Thief2X or for the Inverted
No,
Manse?
no, we're still in the Inverted Manse for
Inverted Manse?
those arrows, for example. Like,
Um,
how did people receive that?
I don't remember a lot of specific feedback on the arrows themselves, but I think people were generally pretty positive on the mission, which I was very, very happy about. Um, so
Because
yeah,
I was
go ahead.
sorry, because I was wondering, like today, I'm actually not really fond of those arrows or like stuff like that in general.
Mhm.
That changes from the original. Maybe it's I don't know. I'm just an old
You
dirty
don't
taffer,
you don't
or
like new tools? Come on, man.
it depends. But
Mhm.
I could imagine like maybe back in the days, like 22 years ago, that people were like, "Oh wow, this is crazy," and maybe they liked it because it's a new thing. And maybe today people are so used to everything, to their thief gameplay that maybe today people would be more like, I don't like them so much. But that, yeah, that was my idea of the question.
I would agree. I think Thief is uh, a very carefully balanced game, and all the default arrows you have and all the tools you have a very specific purpose. But when you're working on a mod, I think it does give you the opportunity to branch out and experiment. So, were they strictly necessary for the experience? Probably not, but they give you a little bit of a change from the norm. So I think it was fine at the time.
And I can imagine, like you had very ambitious goals, so you really wanted to work professionally. So of
Mhm.
course, I can imagine that your drive from your inside was way bigger for that than maybe for someone else.
Yeah, I wanted to see what I could get away with. So, wanted to create something new.
And it's still one of the highly regarded missions. The inverted man's still comes up when there's a threat, like, "Hey, what missions should I play?" Um,
Definitely. Yeah,
yeah. So
Yeah.
Mike, since it's one of your favorite missions of all time, you told me,
it is.
um, yeah, maybe you can ask your question that's up there.
Sure. Yeah, I
Just
had a couple things.
just real quick, I just want to say that I love the new tools, and I love when authors put in new tools and new ways to try things. I try to do that myself, and I love when it's done. So I just want to say that real quick.
No, that's actually an
Amazing.
interesting discussion, and I think different point of views. Because for me, it's like, I know how everything works. And do you guys remember the time when people suddenly started changing the bow? When it was not the normal bow, but suddenly you had this round shaped visor?
Yeah, well, that's more of like a weird, like, I mean, it's cool. It's variety is the spice of life, I guess. But the utility of it is basically exactly the same. It's just you have to learn how to aim it again, I guess. But I'm more talking about like totally new tools, like new little bombs you can use or new arrows, stuff like that.
But why do you like it so much? That would interest me.
Well, because I don't know, maybe it's from playing Thief for 20 years and it's just neat to come across new gadgets and gizmos, and especially if they work in with the lore and work in with the story and everything like that. I really like new stuff and experimenting as well.
Because for me, it's like I want to know what I'm doing. I want to get back to the thief. I feel cozy with it, and then I want my water arrows and my moss arrows and know how they work. That's yeah, but yeah, I can totally can see your point of view.
I think that's part of
I
it too. It's like you get the loadout screen and you're like, I don't know what this arrow does. Do I really want to spend 200 gold on that? And it's kind of an unknown if you're comfortable with your thief playing the way you play it vanilla.
Well said.
Yeah, the question I think is definitely different when you're considering something like a new game or a sequel versus a fan mission, and then again, I think it's different for a longer, more extended mod. Because I think the more isolated the experience is, the more room you have to experiment. And when you're creating something longer or something that's more official, then you want to stick to what's going to give players the best core experience.
Yeah, that's actually true. You have the freedom, because yeah, it doesn't matter if people like it or not. It doesn't have to gain money or anything. So yeah. Another example is like from Thief 2X, the hammer. Um, I think
Oh
that's
god.
one of the greatest tools ever. But every time when I use it, I have this little this must hurt. Um, but yeah, maybe we will talk about that later. So, brethren, Mike, now feel free to ask your question, please.
Sure. Yeah. I was going to say, Inverted Manse, I played it the other day again, and I was just going to say, I think it still holds up today as one of the better missions out there. But I'm sure there's people who would disagree with me. But
I agree.
but anyway, yeah, I mean it's just solid all around. But the question I was going to ask is what you were thinking when you did the different starting points for the mission. I thought that was a really cool addition where you could start in different areas of the level, and you could depending on which difficulty level you picked, certain areas would be blocked off. So it just seems like it's making the mission almost into 3 separate missions, which is really cool.
Yeah, the difficulty system for Thief was actually really quite versatile because it allows you to hide and unhide various objects and geometry in the world. And it was used in kind of a limited capacity, understandably, for the main game because its primary function was uh, to ramp up difficulty for players who wanted a more challenging experience. But because the system was in place, it actually gave you a lot of creativity as an author, where you could do very different things with it. And again, that was kind of born out of experimentation and trying to provide slightly different experiences. So, from what I remember, like one experience was very exploration driven for the Inverted Manse. One was more combat driven, and one was more stealth driven. And back in the original Thief and Thief 2, um, they definitely classify as an immersive sim where you're given a lot of freedom within the environment to a lot of systemic agency to kind of determine how you move through the path. But there were still some restrictions, like for example, on expert difficulty, sometimes you couldn't kill any of the guards. You have to, just either knock them out or avoid them. So I thought, why not expand that out to something deliberate? When you're choosing a different difficulty level, you're kind of choosing your play style ahead of time. And again, it was kind of an experiment to play with the different play styles a little bit and provide a slightly altered experience using the same basic mission.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's even done something like that since then. So, and I just thought it was really cool and unique for a mission. You could legitimately play through all 3 difficulties and not get bored with the level. It was fun. Each thing had a little something different to offer the player.
It has been done, and what I think is like that's the great thing about creativity and new approaches when modders come, that it can inspire others. If you guys maybe remember so Rob and Mike, if you remember the contest mission 10 Little Taffers, it was a mission that also had this approach, but you under the different difficulty settings, you played different characters for the same mission, but from different point of views, which was not so well executed, but the idea was really amazing. And I wonder, maybe your mission, The Inverted Manse, actually inspired the author to do that.
Yeah, I remember having the idea to start out as different, using each difficulty as like a different class, choosing a class like like it's like RPG or something. And I remember having that idea and proposing it in the Editors Guild, and then I think it was Yandris who pointed out to me. He was like, "Have you played the Inverted Manse by Sledge? Because he kind of did that already." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool." So I went and played it, and I was like, "Yeah, that's great."
But it's interesting that it's when I played the Inverted Manse, it was like, oh yeah, that's a very obvious approach, but you have to come to that idea first, and then you have to execute it. So it's obviously not that well known or obvious for people. So I think you had a very original idea there.
Yeah, it was very cool. And I think there have been some missions later that have tried doing something like it, but I don't think it's probably has been executed quite as well as it was with Inverted Manse.
Well, thanks. I'm surprised it holds up. I think it's the kind of idea that you can really only do in a modding community because you can't expect a large percentage of people to replay your content multiple times. But
Yeah.
when the option is there, for fans who are hardcore and who do like really delving into the content, I think it does provide a little something extra. So I really like the idea of playing multiple protagonists or seeing the same events from multiple points of view. That sounds like something really cool that you could do with that system as well.
Are
Yeah.
y- are you
Who
still aware or connected to the Thief community or aware what's going on?
Not so much anymore. I kept up for a number of years, but unfortunately, just with time being what it is, like I've drifted away a little bit these past few years.
Okay, yeah, understandable. Uh,
yeah.
uh,
What was the name of that one mission that came out a few it's kind of, I mean, it's probably been 10 years, if not more now, but there was a mission where in the level you switch between Garrett and another character and you actually like teleport back and forth in the level and
Among
you have
Two
to
Storms.
that's it. Yeah. You have to actually like solve puzzles with two different characters in two different parts of the map and you can actually see each other, and I think it mimics the scouting orb mechanics. You can actually see the other person that you're playing as just like standing there on the other side of a fence that you can't get to, and then you switch back and forth between them. It was kind of neat.
Yeah, because then you had to, someone needed a tool, but of course they were separated in the same building, but they couldn't reach each other just through little gaps where you could throw items and stuff,
Yes,
and the
that's
other
right.
person
Yeah.
could grab it. Yeah, that was some interesting puzzling. Um, but that's another interesting approach, and also another tool well executed. So, um, yeah, I think I can get the idea of why new tools are great. But Mike, you had another question
Yeah,
for
I was
the
kind of.
inverted mans.
I just wondered if you ever, Dave, if you ever had any plans for a sequel to the Inverted Manse and what you were planning on doing with that.
I thought about it very briefly way back in the day, but I never explored it fully. I think largely because my time was so occupied with Thief 2X and then Thief 3 after that, so I never had a chance to really develop it.
Yeah, I can't remember. It's something in the outro or the ending video that kind of hints at a sequel, but I suppose that's what everybody does, right?
Oh, I guess that makes me a liar. I don't
Well, no, I mean it
remember
was very
doing
subtle. It
anything
was
like
just
that
some
ago.
quick mention,
Uh,
but it wasn't.
yeah, I'm sure I would have loved to do a sequel to it at one point in time. I think it's just with everything else going on, I just never had a chance to go back and revisit that universe, but it would have been cool.
And
I
we
agree.
had to take this Thief 2X then instead.
Hmm.
Um, no, but you just were like kind of wondering that it still holds up. I was actually wondering too because I never played the Inverted Mans before because it's like kind of horror themed and that always stops me. But of course, for this, I had to do it and I loved it. And I was actually very impressed when I played it and then after a while, I had to recheck, was it really from that year? And it was. So I think you were ahead of its time very much. Um, that, but how would you describe this era? Because I think it was, of course, Dana was Dana Nightingale or Digital Nightfall at that time was there. Pura was there, who made. I'm pretty sure you remember those guys.
Yeah.
Like, wasn't? Did you have the feeling that this was the experimental phase of because now you had this editor and everything, and now you could go nuts with everything? Was that like a a feeling among the community?
Yeah, I think so. There were a lot of great standouts at the time, and people were trying different things and figuring out the limitations of the engine. And this was before there were a lot of mods that kind of expanded the art and engine capabilities. This was way back when in the original version of the engine. So we had a lot of great missions back in the day. I remember Calendra's Cistern was one of the biggest ones from back then that everybody was talking about. Still a fantastic mission. I really liked like the Vigil and Seeds of Doubt and the Death of Garrett is one of my favorites. And all of these were really different in terms of their approach to mission design and storytelling. So it was really a great time to get into the community and start playing those different kind of missions.
Yeah, because if I remember, Calendra's Legacy, it was the predecessor to Calendra's System by Pura. We had him once as a guest as well, and he also had like those. What was that? Was it the strange weapons, some kind of sword, or what was that? Does anyone remember? You had to collect things, and then you get some strange weapon at the end. It was also a new tool, and so yeah, this must have been a very experimental phase. And must have been very exciting, I can imagine. Like when you guys were all figuring things out, and then someone comes up with something new, and everybody's like, "Whoa!"
Yeah, I think so because there was very little documentation at the time, and people didn't really know what all was possible with the engine. So whenever you discovered something new in that universe, it was really exciting because chances are that nobody else had done it before.
And you already said that pretty close to that time, you already worked on Thief 2X. Could you, yeah, or maybe random Teffer Rob, maybe you want to go on with one of your questions about Thief 2X?
There's that first question from the person, a random intruder, which is not me.
I know, but I
Uh,
think yours makes more sense now. Your
okay.
first question.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah. So yeah, where did the idea for T2X come from, and who was involved in the initial planning of it?
So T2X came about when Looking Glass Studios was closed after Thief 2 was released. I think a lot of people in the community were very passionate about Thief, and were very sad about the news and wanted to make sure that the universe continued on, even if only at a fan mission level. So we had a lot of people who volunteered to become involved in some kind of larger project, and that was at the time headed up by J.R. Clemens, who is known as Avalon in the community. And he put together a large group of people who were willing to commit to a new project. And from that point, it was really about organizing roles within the project, making all the decisions that determine how we wanted to proceed forward, what kind of campaign we wanted to make, and what the story was going to be.
And now there's a question by Random Intruder. How did you come up with the plot for Thief 2X?
Well, I did not, but we had a really great group of people in the beginning who constituted our writing team. The lead writer at the start was a woman by the name of Kathleen Richardson, who is known as Strange Blue. The other members of the plot team were Valeda Wensloff, Ask Ramusin, who is known as Toolhead, and Zeke from the community. And we got together with them. It was the project leads and the writers. We did everything in those days on through chat, through MIRC, which is the
Yeah.
old equivalent of Slack, basically, where we all got together
Yeah.
in a chat room. And at the beginning, we had, I think, a number of concepts, like design and story concepts, that we wanted to implement. And it was about figuring out how those ideas would come together. Like, so for example, we knew that we wanted to have a new protagonist. We knew that we wanted to have a new villain. We knew we wanted some missions to take place outside of the city. And we knew we wanted all the enemy factions of both Thief games to be represented, as well as having some new enemies as well. So there were a whole bunch of those ideas that we had in kind of this pot. And then from there, we were figuring out kind of who the protagonist was and what her journey was going to be, and just kind of structuring, just kind of putting the bones in place for the plot. I will say, like, I think story was really an important factor in Thief 2X. Famously, I think when after Thief came out, Thief 1 was very much plot driven, where the writing drove the vision for the missions, and in Thief 2,
Yeah.
Randy Smith was quoted as saying that the missions came largely first, and then the plot followed to some extent what the mission structure was going to be. In Thief 3 was a little bit of both. We had some missions that we definitely wanted to do, but I think the story again came to the forefront a bit more. And we're working on Thief 2X. I think we were generally agreed that the mindset should be that we should do the story first. And that would form the outline for what the missions were going to be. With some back and forth, of course. We had a lot of mission designers involved in the conversation as well.
Yeah.
So from that point forward, Strange Blue put together, like, really organized the discussions and put together the outline for the missions. And then once we had that base outline, she stepped away and turned over the reins to the actual writing team and the lead designers. And that's when we broke down the game into a series of documents for the missions. And I think it I should mention the time we didn't really know what we were doing, and I think we would have had a much more organized and more document-driven process if we were going to do it over again. But it was enough. Like surprisingly, I think everything came together, and people were very excited to work on a new campaign, and weren't at all worried about scope or ambition or how long it was going to take. We just wanted to put together kind of the best outline for a story that we could, and once we had the mission documents in place, we went from there.
I think
Yeah.
the product speaks for itself. So I
It,
think you did enough to come up with such a great thing. What would interest me is what I think it's a very brave approach, and or maybe again something modders can do because they don't have to fear any industry bosses coming. Um, you totally changed, like Garrett is that um, you know grumbly character, and the world of course is still very dark, but I think with a female character everything felt a bit more lighthearted, and of course she was being sucked into this. She didn't want to do that. uh, so everything was different to Garrett, and I think it was actually a very modern approach to have a female protagonist. Was that something you guys were aiming for, or was it just coming from the writing?
I think that just happened naturally out of the discussions, something that the writers were thinking about early on. And we wanted the journey of the main character to be different. Like Garrett is very world weary and very shaped by his experiences with the keepers, whereas this new protagonist we wanted to be uh, start from an entirely different place where they were more optimistic, and then be changed as they were drawn into the city and exposed to all these challenges and the violence within the city, and come out stronger and more heroic, but also significantly changed and significantly less optimistic than when they'd started out. And I think it was a really compelling idea to have that kind of protagonist. And that was just the idea behind it. And Zaya is the character that came out of those talks.
yeah, you can really hear her progression as the campaign goes on, like just even with her voice, like starting out in the very early mission, very kind of naive, very sort of um, happy-go-lucky, and then very quickly as basically her entire world is destroyed and she's left on her own, and she gets trained by one of the villains. Um, you can definitely hear just with little quips that she kind of slowly becomes more Garrett-like as the game goes on, and I thought that was really cool.
But I think from her perspective, it's, in my opinion, even a bit more understandable because her brother was killed, and she has this anger inside her, and suddenly she has the tools and the skills she developed, and I think this turns the character really, and I think it's more relatable, even more than Garrett, in my opinion. So I
Cousin
like that.
cousin was killed, and
Yeah, cousin. Yeah,
and
right.
he's here with us now from beyond the grave.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the magic of Discord and podcasts.
And I think Kathleen Richardson, I believe she's like a legit novelist. I think she's come out with a few books now, hasn't she? I believe so.
I don't know. I would be very interested to read them if so.
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure. I think I remember seeing that on the forums like years ago. I think the name she uses on her books
Oh
is
yeah.
Cat Richardson, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, she
Yeah.
is. She is quite a successful novelist.
Yeah.
Very good one.
Was there back in the day some controversy about her, maybe the voice and everything? Because I know that some people really dislike her voice in that. But at the time, was it like the same voices that people that came with the same ideas or dislikes or likes?
I don't think she voiced Zaya. I think that was somebody else, right? Or was that?
That was Win April Lurdy.
That's right.
Ah,
That's right.
sorry.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
my question still stands. Was there some controversy around that character and the voice in combination?
I think I think most people liked it, but there's always like some who felt she was uh, a little too bright in the beginning.
Mm.
Which is a fair criticism. So people had different opinions, but I think generally the community was really happy with the new character, and I think overall she did a really wonderful job. So we were lucky to get her, with a lot of the people on the voice acting team.
I actually think that since she is very lighthearted at the beginning and maybe a bit naive, that actually makes her progression of the character, way bigger than, imagine there would be the skilled thief lady would come from that ship and, and would immediately go to work. That would be a different story. But here, I think you can see all the things and it feels more reliable, relatable, I mean. So yeah, but yeah, of course, there's always different opinions, like with new tools. But Rob, it's your time to shine. You have several things to ask, so please go
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. So let's see here. You answered quite a few of the questions already in the last answer. So let's see. When building the campaign, were deadlines for various maps set, and how lenient were you with those deadlines?
The short answer is that we tried to set a lot of deadlines, and then it did not work at all. So in the end, we ended up having to kind of abandon a hard schedule for various reasons. I think in part because uh, we didn't fully understand the scope of each mission. I think our documentation was not as strong as it should have been in a lot of cases, and in others, I think it's because people had real life interfere, and building a mission takes months, in
Oh
years
yeah.
in some cases.
Yeah.
And so we tried to be as structured as possible because there are always dependencies. Like, for example, if you're going to create a new environment, you need new textures and new models and things like that. You need the voices and the guard models to put in. So we tried to have those dependencies worked out, but it really didn't. It really didn't shape up. People's real lives and levels of commitment were all over the place, and we just did the best we could to try to get things worked out as smoothly as we could. And by the end, I think we had a really more solid process where we had a smaller group who was really driving uh, the finished product and making sure that everything got done. Thief2X was huge. We had, if I remember, 61 total contributors, and it's really difficult to organize that number of people online, and so eventually, because of the varying schedules and all the different people that we had working on it, we needed that core group in order to kind of drive things home and make sure that things got done near the end.
Yeah.
I think Rob,
Yeah.
you can sing a song about how difficult it is to to do something like that.
Well, yeah, that's kind of why I'm asking, because just like everything you're saying is very familiar, and that kind of leads into one of my other questions, which, and I kind of already know the answer, but I'm curious what the experience was like with T2X. When it comes to big online projects, especially volunteer work, people come and go. Did you have lots of issues with people eager to join and then just kind of piecing out like pretty quickly, or just kind of not being it? All of a sudden, they just disappear and you can't reach them. You have no idea if they've done anything, like that type of thing. And in those situations, um, did you end up having to cut content, or did you just kind of take over and do it?
This is your
That type of
personal
thing.
agenda, Rob, right?
No, I'm just curious.
Yes. No, that's an excellent question. And yes, we had problems with all that. I think in the very beginning, we had a lot of people who were eager to help, and it became clear that some people didn't really have the time or the skills to contribute, and I think that problem manifested itself really quickly. So we weren't really too worried about that. We said, for those folks, we said, you're more than welcome to help us test or hang out and offer feedback, and I think that worked out pretty well. We did not have problems with people leaving per se because we wanted a structure. We really wanted to be like as inclusive as possible to make sure all the folks from the community had a chance to contribute while still maintaining the quality of the project, which was challenging, of course. But I think the real problem that we had was with people ghosting, where it's not someone who would come in and say, hey, I can only contribute for 4 months. Can I work on this particular piece of content? That's great. We can
Yeah.
build a schedule around that and do that. But the problems we had were when people would do work that was partially completed, like half of a voice set or half of a texture pack or half of a mission, and then just stop responding. And that drove everybody nuts because for a long time, like, we didn't know how to deal with those issues. And I think in the end we just resolved to to give folks a friendly like heads up, like, hey, we need to move ahead with the mission. If I don't hear from you within the next like week, then we'll go ahead and reassign it and make sure that the work gets done. If you want to come back, feel free to shoot me an email and we can work something out. So that was kind of the approach we had by that point. And we didn't try not to take it like too personally or anything. We just set the deadlines, and we're like, hey, if you don't have time in real life or your schedule doesn't allow anymore, it's fine. We'll take over and carry it through from here.
Yeah.
One thing that would interest me, because at the moment there is a huge campaign in the working, I would say, like comparable to Thief2X. It's called the Black Parade. That is still in the making, and I know that they, are very secretive about what everything will be about. But how was it with your project with Thief2X? Was it just this inner circle, that was aware of all the ideas, exchanges, and stuff like that, or were you more open? Was it like a project that was very transparent, developed for everybody to see?
In short, I think we weren't overly secretive. I think we tried to keep the exact details of the plot and the missions under wraps, but we had uh, an open MIRC channel where people could come in and ask questions, if I remember correctly. Um, I I think it was more that uh, we didn't start showing content until it was ready. Like at one point when we had a good representation of the missions, and felt we were moving towards the equivalent of like an alpha, like a content complete. We launched a website and put up a bunch of screenshots and a bunch more info, and that's really what drew interest in. So I think it was not so much that we needed to be overly secretive. It's just that people weren't interested until we had something to show, or I guess the larger community was willing to be patient until we had something to show. Because in a lot of cases, mod projects will fall through or not be the quality that people really want, and so we had to wait until we were ready to show.
Okay. So Rob, please go on.
Okay. Let's see here. So, when it comes to working on this project on Thief2X, what is your favorite memory of working on it?
Hmm. My favorite memory, I think, was release day, because we were working on bug fixing right up until the last moment. We had our own bug database, which was written at the time by Duncan Cook, who was a great programmer who also built missions for us. He's an excellent game developer. He wrote us our own bug database. We were reporting bugs. We didn't have like a real QA department. It was just all the developers, and some of the fans were testing the game for quite a few weeks, fixing all the bugs, and we went right up until the very last day, I think, when we were compiling the final version and making sure everything installed correctly and tested and was relatively bug free. And so that night, I remember staying up all night, I think, and waiting until the sun came up. I think it was about 8 a.m. and it released I think people in Europe got it a little sooner than the States, or it was a different time. So people got a chance to play it, and just seeing the first comments come in and the first forum post and people being generally happy with it. I think that was my best memory, to know that, it spent years of our life on the project and that it hadn't all been in vain, that it was actually released and that, people were actually playing it, enjoying it.
It
Yeah.
must have been amazing because I have the feeling when we're releasing a new episode, but the project that you were working for years on, and then that must have been such an exciting moment. I can imagine that.
Yeah, what was the total development time for the project, like years wise?
I think it was about 5 years, because it was
Ooh.
it was first proposed right after the Looking Glass studio closure, after Thief 2 was released, and then it took some months to get organized, but it wasn't released until, what was it, 2005 or so. So it was quite a few years.
Yeah, I was still in high school, and I remember stumbling upon the screenshots in the computer lab at my high school in like keyboarding class or something. And I remember that was the first time I'd ever even heard of it. And I was like, this, I was just blown away by the screenshots. I was like, this, I was still very new to all the fan mission stuff. I barely even knew about it. And the really crappy dial-up internet I had it in the country in the Midwest could not download something of that size. So I I had to like ask Comag basically to send me a DVD of the of the campaign. And man, what I was looking for, I was like checking the mail every day, waiting for that DVD to arrive so I could play it. And I gotta say, like, I mean, Zaya's first words when the campaign opens is, finally, this day has finally arrived. And like that is like her attitude about it, and that's how I felt when I fired it up for the first time. So it was like the most perfect opening. and
That
and
is
yeah,
such an iconic moment because I can still hear the waves.
yeah.
It starts with the waves and then it goes on and it's like sucking you in. And I think that Thief 2X actually was for many people an entry point to Thief fan missions.
It absolutely was, and like it's still, I mean, there have been lots of really good quality stuff that has come out since, but because it was
like
kind of the first and the biggest,
Gunbreaker,
it's
for
still
example.
no, we don't need to talk about that. But it was the first and like the biggest fan community project, so it still holds up and it's still widely regarded as the actual best fan made content made for Thief yet. It still holds that title. So yeah.
That's a great memory. Yeah, thanks for that. So it's really wonderful to hear like people enjoyed the product when it came out, and that it still has a life now, which is amazing. So I know there is a lot of fantastic fan content out there now, and the community is still going strong. But back in the day, it was a big deal for us to release, and
Yeah.
I'm really happy that people found it.
And
It
how
was
was
like a
that?
whole new Thief game. That was just, you couldn't beat that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how was that for you? Like, because the reception was pretty great, and it was even featured in like some magazines and stuff. How was that for you? What kind of feeling did that give you?
I It was great. It was amazing. I think the best responses really came from the community. I think getting the recognition from the gaming press back then uh, was a great validation, but it was very slow to come. I think we had a number of articles. I still have like some of the magazine articles that mentioned us, but they trickled in like over the course of a year or so. And I think it took, I want to say, like 9 or 10 months before PC Gamer UK picked up on it, and they actually put us on a disc and on one of the discs accompanying the magazine. I thought that was great, but
Wow.
it took them a long time to find it. So the Thief community has always been a little bit small, but very devoted, and I think the opinions of the fans and the fact that people were downloading it was really the greatest thing. And we were able to track download stats, and I think amazingly the word was, I never learned like officially like how many copies that the early Thief game sold. I have an idea, but I think for Thief 2X, I think our download numbers from two mirrors was almost like 100,000 at one point, which is
Wow.
amazing. And
Yeah.
some of that, of course, is like broken downloads and people re-downloading the game. But just to see those numbers, like such that kind of percentage of that's basically like DLC, like a real like DLC for the game being downloaded. Like I think that speaks to the devotion of the community and the fact that people love this game so much that they're willing to download a big campaign was just great to see. That other people cared about the series as a whole, like as much as we did working on it.
Yeah.
I think it's because there is nothing like the original two Thief games, in my opinion, and that's why we are still sticking to it. And then, like after years, something like that comes out. Of course, it's like for everybody, like that. Like I'm a non-believer, but maybe you're like, wow, thank God, that there's still some fresh content. And then you come in and discover, hey, there's even more fan stuff. Um, yeah, I think that we can actually thank the Thief2X project a lot for this community. I think it's still because my entry point to the community was as well over Thief2X. Then I discovered all the rest. And this made me do a podcast later, which is also some fan project. And and I think Thief2X actually is a much appreciated thing till today for different reasons, not just the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, in the campaign today, like what is your favorite mission to play? What's the one you enjoy the most?
That's a hard question. I think the mission that I enjoyed working on the most was the city mission, While the City Sleeps. It's the third mission in the campaign where you have to make your way across the city. I just love building big open world environments with lots of rooftops and lots of places to explore. So I think that's probably still my favorite. And uh, it was funny. Like I worked on that mission very early. I did like a draft of that before I was working at Ion Storm, and it was okay. It had some issues. I was still figuring out like how to build those kind of environments. And then I was at Ion Storm for a few months, and I stepped not away from the project entirely, but put it on the back burner for a few months. And then I came back and I retackled the project. I did an entirely new draft of it. And I think Avalon, who is the T2X project lead, played it, and he's like, wow, like, you've learned a lot at Ion Storm. This doesn't suck nearly as much as the last one. And so I thought that was a great validation, like, doing a second draft of the mission that turned out to be so much better than the first and a lot more fun. So yeah, I think just building those kind of open environments I've fallen in love with building those kind of environments ever since.
Yeah, and
Can
that's
you
a
can you tell which missions you worked on?
Yeah, we shared the design team shared a lot of mission responsibilities. I think in the beginning, the ones that I worked on from the start were uh, the City Sleeps mission, which was number 3, the Mechanist train station, which was 4, the Smuggler base, which was missions 5 and 9, and the final mission, which was the confrontation with Malik in the caves, which was mission 13. But I contributed to a lot of them as kind of a secondary designer. Like I spent a lot of time in mission 2 with the late great Dave Johnson working on the museum.
yeah.
A lot of time in the cathedral and working on the Gingerbread Man's undead mission, which was I think mission 12 late in the game. So a
Cure,
lot,
yeah.
but yeah.
Great
Because
mission.
what I find really interesting about Thief2X, especially um, from mission 4 with the train shattering the enemy, I think, um,
Mhm.
and then with the smuggler's hideout. What sometimes I forget that those are separate missions. What I really like is this transition between some of the missions, and I think especially that part of the game is so the transition is so uh, soft that it feels like one big mission. Of course you have your limitations, so you had to cut it up, but it feels so amazing. yeah, so that's why it's sometimes really hard to pick out one for me. But I would be interested, like, to Rob and Mike, what are your favorite missions of Thief 2X?
Um, yeah, so it's hard not to say from because I love city missions, open city missions, and so it's for me it's hard. It's actually hard not to say while the city sleeps. I love the smuggler, the Sunnyport mission with the train. The train was a huge like technological achievement, and
Yep.
still is just really cool the way it was done. Like it's just a joy to watch. Uh, but while the city sleeps actually inspired me a lot accidentally, and I wanted to mention this real quick, um, and I wanted to confirm. I don't think so, but I wanted to confirm. So at the very beginning of the map, and maybe you don't even remember, but there's actually a servant lady that's wandering around in a loop at the very beginning part. And when I first played the mission a long time ago, I remember at one point hearing screaming, a woman screaming, and I didn't know where it was coming from. I didn't know why. And eventually I ended up finding her body in the canal, and I didn't put her there. And as far as I know, nobody else put her there. So I actually thought that it was a scripted event where just to show like the grim, dark nature of the city that a woman got killed and thrown into the canal. And now I think that, and you can confirm, but I think that it might have been just a pathing bug where she accidentally fell off the canal, the walk while she was walking on it. And but at the time, I thought it was a scripted event. Maybe you can confirm.
That sounds like, yeah, like not that sounds like an emergent event where she probably fell off or got killed by some of the other combat that was the AI versus AI combat that's in the map. But yeah, that wasn't scripted.
See, so that accidental event has inspired me and many other people. So now in any city mission that I work on, I've always got like sounds in the distance, and one of those sounds is a woman screaming, and
Not
that's where
just
actually
a
that comes
woman.
comes from.
But that's really cool.
Yeah,
So David, your games even inspired people by accident.
Uh,
Um,
yeah,
that's some skill, I have to
it's
say.
funny.
But Mike, what was your favorite mission of Thief 2X?
I'm pretty much an undead fan, so I kind of liked The Cure and also
Ah.
Down Among Dead Men too. Those are both great.
I cannot
I-
decide between Shadowing the Enemy and was it the Grand Hotel? Was that
the one
with
with the guns.
Yeah,
yeah.
Mission 11. Yeah, with the
Yeah,
Grand Hotel.
I cannot decide because but I think the train mission, Shadowing the Enemy, was first of all, as Rob already mentioned, like the technical aspect with the train. It's like you come there, and it's like what, you know. But also like the way how to get into the train, and then of course the transition to Sunnyport, which is actually very snowy. Was that a joke, by the way? That Sunnyport was full of snow.
Yes, it was.
Okay, so I got
Also
it.
mentioned in Sunnyport's also mentioned in Inverted Manse in one of the readables. I noticed that was pretty cool.
Ah, yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, references. I mean, well, the idea being that Sunnyport may have a short tourist season where nobles came and visit, but you're actually visiting in a very cold and grim part of the year when it's a little more deserted.
But the atmosphere was great. I
Yeah,
think following missions in Thief are like a hit or miss, but I think that's one of the better ones.
and the undead mission that Mike mentioned, the Down Among Dead Men, that was the first time that we realized that we could chop off the arms and heads of the zombies, and that was great fun to do. I don't mind undead missions so much, but I do tend to destroy all undead. At least I did back in the day. So it was really fun. It made it really fun to play. That knowing that you could cut off their heads and arms, and they're basically can't hurt you very much once you've done that. So that was cool.
Yeah,
Definitely.
that was a fun, like, more morbid experimentation moment with the tools just to see what was possible. But yeah, one of the other things the undead had was their vomit attack, which was taken from
Right.
Resident Evil. And I remember there I was sick. Sick from work one day, and I typically don't take many sick days, but I remember I was really sick, and I stayed home, and I was well enough to sit at my computer for a few hours, and I worked on the zombie vomit attack, and implemented that, and my wife gave me a hard time about that. She's like, you're sick, and you spend your sick time instead of resting, like sitting at your computer making a vomit attack for zombies. So somebody better appreciate this eventually.
Seems appropriate to me, but yeah.
Yeah,
Did you,
exactly right.
did you
So
record the sound yourself that day of the vomit?
That was.
I
Have you
I
been
did not.
inspired by a sickness?
I did not. I think that came much later, but the actual behavior was done in an afternoon or about a day, I guess, like at that time. So
Just hope. Let's just hope that Iron Storm doesn't listen, um, because they would say, "Hey, you could have sat at the computer in our office as well." It seems.
Mhm. Well, we don't like to get other people sick, so
Oh yeah, of course.
sitting,
That's true.
yeah.
There's a point in so I've looked through the files for T2X and I did notice that there is a Garrett mesh in there, and
Mhm.
I've played through the game multiple times and maybe I've never found it, but I'm assuming there's a certain point probably in the sheriff's mansion, since Garrett is also there while Zaya is there. It
Mhm.
I never found it, but is there a point where is an Easter egg maybe you can kind of catch a glimpse of Garrett at some point? I never found it myself.
Yes, there is. That was an Easter egg that we put in, and I'm
Spoiler
sorry,
alert, people.
but I don't remember exactly where it was. But yes, we did put him in there.
Ah,
I'll have to
damn.
flag it in.
Have
So
to
it's
search it out.
still no answer.
Yeah.
I'll have to open it up and drum it. I don't like doing that typically, but I will if I have to.
Yeah,
But
it's somewhere far away. I think if you zoom, I think you can see him somewhere scoping out a place. But yeah, I don't. From what I remember, I don't think there was any behavior. I think he was crouched down somewhere. I'm trying to think who else would know. I don't know. Maybe somebody who worked on the project would remember.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I think the mesh is just like it's almost like a silhouette, but you can see his face. It looked like something that would work well at a distance, like you say. Uh,
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
just I remember finding it in there and being like, oh, I bet he's in there somewhere.
but
There's no way I wouldn't put him in there, you know?
but I thought you can see Garrett, so he has done a bad job.
Mm.
Well, Zay is also a thief, so maybe she can see him.
Ah, yeah, or she's a keeper.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. I didn't know that, of course, since I don't know how don't observe the files. But you learn something new every time. That's cool.
Mhm.
And I know what I'm going to do
um,
tomorrow.
yeah.
Hmm.
And then that kind of leads me to the other question I had, which, well, I guess it doesn't necessarily lead me there, but it's here. So, but was there a certain moment where there was a big like issue that needed to be figured out, and the team at that point had no idea how it could be done? Um, and was this issue eventually addressed and then fixed? And if so, what was the solution?
Yeah, I think the most challenging moment in the project was when I think about the halfway point, or a little bit more. We had about a year and a half left. I'd stepped away, not as I said, not entirely, but mostly to work at Ion Storm. And coming back, we had the leads were talking in MIRC, and I think we had a moment where we realized that the project was never going to get completed under the current trajectory because too many people had disappeared, and we had this vastly different standard of quality. I think between like some of the well, not even standard of quality, but I think consistency among like some of the assets and things like that. Like for example, we had a lot of people who contributed briefing art, and at the time, um, Adobe Photoshop was still new, and scanning technology is not as sophisticated as it is today. And so we had drawings that even when they were good quality, like looked quite different from one another. And the same was kind of true of missions and textures and various things. And so we made the decision there that we didn't want to give up, that we wanted to pull everything together, and we needed to establish a process to really do that. And the solution was to appoint uh, to give the leads more responsibility and give them the power to go in and change assets directly. And so, for example, for the missions, that was largely me. So taking over some of the mission, a couple of the missions that had been abandoned, working to make them a bit more consistent for like the briefing art, for example. Saturnine, like David Talkinson took that over, just did a wonderful job taking all the disparate different types of drawings and making sure that they all looked consistent with one another by bringing them into Photoshop and painting them appropriately. Same thing with textures with Nilsa Dink, and we did that kind of across the board, and just committed ourselves, I think, to a big push in the last year and a half or so to bring everything together, and it actually worked out. I think really well. It's much more considering the all the different people from all around the world who worked on the project. It ended up being surprisingly consistent, and I think because of those efforts in the last year and a half or so to bring things together.
Yeah, that's very true. I've definitely noticed that. Like that's one of the things I've kind of marveled about because I know what it's like to have a bunch of different people working on something with different styles and different art. And Thief 2X does look. I mean, it looks like it's made by the same person. Like each mission looks like it was made by the same person as far as the assets go. Like it's all consistently flows very nicely, and it looks like it doesn't look like a bunch of disparate levels put together by different people, like something like the Chain Project or something like that. It looks like a like a consistent product and a consistent experience. And I've always been super impressed with how that looked in the end.
Yeah. Thank you. It took a lot of effort, and I think especially because the tools for DrawMed are not really conducive to that kind of consistency. Like even having part of one mission and another mission, like when you're going from shadowing the enemy, which is the first time you go to Sunnyport, to the smuggler base, and the next one, there's some of the geometry that exists in both maps, and even technically, not even from an artistic point of view, but just technically, getting those things together to seem consistent, that it all flows together was really hard. But I think it was worth the effort. We wanted to make things feel as consistent as we could.
Yeah.
Speaking of technical challenges, the train, which is, I think,
Mhm.
very impressive till today, was that a huge challenge?
Oh yeah, that was our biggest technical challenge. That was originally started by Avalon. That was like he had the idea, I think, for the original train mission and put together a little prototype. But we had a lot of individual problems to solve. Like we had to transition between the static parts of the map, which is the station and Sunnyport, with the train in the middle, which we did with a teleport and a fade out. But it was pretty seamless. We had to solve the moving terrain, which we did with giant moving objects. We had to solve things like tossing a body onto the moving terrain, because just because you tossed a body onto an object that's moving doesn't mean that the body's going to move with it. We actually had to put invisible conveyor belts like under the terrain, and then make sure that the timing matched the movement of the big terrain objects exactly.
So the
Uh,
train actually moved.
no, well, the terrain moved. The terrain,
The terrain.
it,
Okay, sorry.
yeah. So the train itself was static because the
Yeah,
geometry indeed
I
has to be
thought so.
static.
Yeah.
But we had other problems too, where performance problems, because the train is a pretty big mission where you can see through all the different cars ahead. So we actually had to put giant invisible doors that would block several cars ahead, and they would time it so as you would progress along through the train or along the rooftops, that the doors in front of you would open and the doors behind you would close, and that would block the geometry to stop those crashes and performance problems. And we had to hide that through fog. So there were all kinds of issues that we had to solve. It was a lot of fun, but it did take some effort to get all this done.
Yeah, and that
But I
was
think
pre New Dark. So now with New Dark released, like that probably wouldn't even have been an issue. But back then, like I mean, you had to solve that stuff. That's really cool.
and I think it was worth the effort, because that's, I think, for everybody who plays it for the first time, it's such a wow moment.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because especially if you know that the Darker engine is, pretty limited, and yeah, I still love it. I think the mission is great in itself, but that aspect, I think, makes it even more special.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. I
absolutely.
mean, it's funny because there's so many like train missions in other games, but we're used to thinking of the Dark Engine as being very limited, and so it was a big deal at the time to
Yeah,
to figure out those technological hurdles and make them work for that particular engine.
I don't think it has been done since, if I remember it correctly.
Hmm.
There's been a couple fan missions. Not many, not many. I think there's only one that I can think of. It was just some kind of weird, uh, like novelty mission. It was more of like a tech demo than it was an actual mission. But I think it was called like Chuffy Train or something like
Ah,
that. It was,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I don't really remember
Slugs,
it a
right?
great deal.
Yeah, but it was not nothing to compare,
No, no, no,
not
no.
such a serious approach, yeah. One question that just comes to my mind: who came up with because it's still a joke among the community, I think, with came up with the disguise name for Gorman Druid, Norman Druid?
Oh, that's funny. I don't remember. It might have been Valeda Wenslaw or one of the other writers, but it was from the writing team.
I think I and I could be wrong here, but I think that's actually his disguised name in Thief 2, I believe.
Oh,
It might
really?
be.
I believe so. Yeah.
It,
Like it yeah.
Okay,
oh yeah, maybe
because
it was. Maybe the writing team was astute enough to pick that up and bring it back.
okay, then you were just true to the lore. But okay,
Yep.
because for me that was something I think you discovered in the brothel, right? Um,
Mhm.
where I was like, "What the?" And I was always like thinking that, they must have so much fun, and giggles, ha ha ha, because everybody will recognize that it's such a cheap disguise name. But I thought like, haha, we keep it in there. But yeah, maybe it was from the original.
In all
Yeah.
fairness, I could be misremembering and lumping Thief 2X in with the official canon, which wouldn't surprise me, because it feels so close. Like I could be doing that. I thought that was his like fake name in Thief 2, but I could be
I
misremembering.
think you are right now that you say that. So at Looking Glass they had that giggle moment, I suppose. But still, for me it's still connected to Thief 2X because for me it was like I think it was because of the situation because you approach him. You are in one room with him where he's still alive, and I think that was a very that moment had a huge impact on me because it wasn't given in the original games, and maybe that's why I kept it in my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. Maybe it was Toolhead then, because he was, from what I remember, responsible for the writing in the last 4 missions. I think the last part of the game.
Because when I Google Norman Druid, Thief 2X always comes up. Um, of
That's
ill
funny.
repute. Yeah, but I think the community will tell us. So, guys, anything else about Thief 2X? I think there's so much to discuss. I could discuss about the museum and every mission individual. Yeah. What I want to know is there is that guard voice that is so. Um, I think he was one of the angry guards, but he has such an impressive voice. I always remember because it's so unique. But who do you remember who that was? If you know who I mean, which
I don't know exactly which one that you mean. We had Tim Gormley was one of the guards. Dave Johnson was one of the guards. And then I think Lone Star was one of the guards, if I remember.
okay. No, because there's one guard voice that think it's so iconic. It would have fitted into the original game as well because it's so amazing. Um, yeah,
Do you
but
remember any of the lines from him?
no, I don't. But he was always angry. Like
Yes.
he was like the Daniel Tron part. Um, like the original game was that angry guard, and I think he was like, yeah, he's even angrier sounding brother. He was like really like that,
Mhm.
and that was such a perfect fit. And yeah, it always
Mm.
made me giggle.
Mhm.
And then you have this clear voice from the protagonist, and yeah, that I really liked it. Yeah, such a great such a great project. But yeah, Mike, is there anything you want to add?
Well, I was just putting dates together. This question isn't on our list, but I was kind of wondering, was there an issue with working at Ion while you were doing this? It seems like a lot of people who've taken real jobs in the industry have had to kind of put their fan stuff on the side because basically it was in their contract that they couldn't do that kind of thing. Was that ever an issue for you?
Oh, great question.
It was never. How do I say? Uh, Whenever you sign up for a studio, you have a obligation never to work for a competitor or never to work for another company. All that standard. I could have never done that. The fan mission stuff, it was kind of wrapping up at that point, and I stepped away for a time, and then as my work on Thief 3 at Einstorm was wrapping up, I came back for the last year or whatever, and help finish up Thief 2X. So the biggest conflict was really for time. So my whole time at Ion Storm, I think was crazy, which we'll get into in a bit. But in order to balance those two things, there were times when I'd work like a full day with extra hours, going home at like 10 or 11 at night, and then staying up to work on Thief 2X until like 3 or 4 in the morning. And that wasn't unusual. I did that really for months at the end, trying to finish everything up. And eventually everything was complete. Of course, like, professional work always comes first, and you never want to
Sure.
have any conflict there. So it was really making sure that D3 got done on time, which it did.
Cool. I just wondered because I've heard guys having to completely drop their work, which is just it doesn't seem to make sense if they're not making money on it. Why would you have to do that? But
Yeah,
it's different.
it's a bit different depending on where you go and in the contract that you sign. I know a lot of guys who actually have who do actually work on smaller projects, which are paid projects, or usually not fan missions, because if you do your work like all the time during the day, you don't want to spend like hours at night doing the exact same thing for
Right.
if you've been
Yeah.
doing it for a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just depends on where you are and what you've signed.
Got it.
So, yeah, I think we can now go on with Thief Deadly Shadows. Um, I I'm still amazed by the idea that someone from the community got to work on the actual Thief game. Um, but yeah, give us an insight. How was it? So you told us already how you ended up there, or how you finally got there. Let's say that. Um, but yeah, please describe the whole thing. It was in Texas, right? It was
Yeah,
being visioned in Texas, right? Yeah.
it was in Austin, Texas. Yes.
So how was it when you got signed, you got the contract, and then you moved there, right?
Yeah.
And
So
that
it
is
was Iron Storm Austin was in a corporate office building. We were uh, in North Austin at the time, and it was quite a nice office. Things were divided at the time into large rooms where we had. This was typical at the time, like disciplines in each room. So we had a room for all the designers. So I was in a room with when I first got there. I think Emil Pagliarulo, like Nate Blaisdell, Jeremy Graves, Brian Kleins, Jordan Thomas, and some more people came on eventually in the long term. But just walking in and getting to hang out and design with all the other designers at the start was it's very informative and intimidating at the same time. I was just a dumb kid at the time. I didn't know what I was doing. I had to figure everything out, and I was just very happy to be there.
But how was that? Did you feel um kind of proud, or that you you are a thief. You are a taffer, from the community. Now you're there. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I tried to approach it with an open mind. I know I had a lot to learn, and I think it was really cool that everybody was so excited about the game and so excited to work on it. I think we had a lot of uh, technological hurdles to overcome, and we had to rebuild the game many times over the course of its development. Um, but everybody, for the most part, at least on the design team, was always very enthusiastic, and I think that was always really inspirational being there. But it was hard. It was a very very tough, like moving from the fan community and into kind of a new standard and having to figure things out both from a design point and from a technological standpoint at the same time.
so, Mike, now it's your time to shine because you had a lot of questions for this part. So please go on.
Sure. That's actually a pretty good lead. My first question was the difference. How was it creating missions in Pyramid compared to, I'm guessing it was Unreal Ed, even though I think it was the Flesh engine, right? But it was Unreal, a version of Unreal.
Yeah, it was Unreal 2.5, but we replaced most of the core systems in it, which included the rendering, physics, AI, portaling, sound propagation, and a number of other things. So I think building was different for a number of reasons. One was because we were figuring things out technologically, and we were working with an engine in flux, which I'd never done before because the tools that are released to communities are, of course, relatively stable and not changing. Whereas in this case, we were getting regular tool updates all the time. And then just the process of building was very different. In Andromeda, things are largely brush based, and you're building like a lot of complex shapes out of primitives. In Unreal, the process for us, both from an aesthetic and from a technology point of view, was more driven by art pieces, by static meshes, so more detailed meshes in the world. And so it was figuring out the process to how to merge those two things together. So there were still brushes, like the old Unreal was still you would still use primitives to kind of carve out your basic shapes, but you wouldn't do your detail there. You would do your detail in art and then merge those two things together. So, for example, like the Hammerite Cathedral, which I worked on at the time, the main nave of the room is in the main church is mostly built out of cubes, and then the things like the columns and the arches are built by the artist and are assembled kind of like Lego pieces in there. And some of that process is still kind of in place today. I mean, we don't work with brushes anymore, but we work with some of the same art principles where depending on the engine that you're using, especially if you're using Unreal, you're building a lot of your art pieces in programs like Maya or 3D Studio Max, and then importing them in and assembling them together and kit bashing them together.
I guess that kind of makes sense. And I know the editor for Thief 3 finally was released to the community at one point, but didn't seem to really catch on that well. Guessing that's because it was harder to create all these meshes to make the levels, probably, right?
Yeah, the barrier for entry is much higher, starting I think kind of around the mid aughts, because it just from a building perspective, you have a much harder degree of difficulty in getting into the tools, and then it requires a greater degree of expertise in different fields. So, there's the basic building blocks, and then there's terrain. If you're working with the terrain engine, there's the art itself, and then there's VFX and anything else that you want to add to a level. It used to be that those things were all kind of tied together and simple to create, but as we've gone on over time, the disciplines have become a lot more specialized. And even now, there are in many studios separations between actual level builders and then designers who do scripting and other things, or tech designers, depending on where you go and what you're working on.
Sure. Were you involved at all in getting the T3 editor released to the public, or?
Only in a peripheral sense. I think Jordan Thomas really drove that with the engineers at Ironstorm, and I was really grateful that he was um, really committed to getting the tools released to the community. But it was a big process because whenever you release tools to a community, you have to get publisher sign off, and it has to be you have to allocate like a certain amount of work to it to make sure that the tools can be downloaded and are stable and don't have issues. So I'm really glad they were released eventually.
Yeah, I mean, there were some good missions put out. Just I would say probably not the quantity that we had for the obviously for Dromid.
Yeah, and in fairness, I mean, it was a very difficult engine to work with. It was cobbled together from uh, from base Unreal and the custom pieces that we put and yeah, there's just a lot of stuff to learn.
Yep. Okay, next question. I guess we kind of covered this already, but I had a question about what the culture was like working at Ion Storm, considering you were working around all these X Looking Glass people and just how it all worked together, I guess.
I think it was it was I think everybody was very friendly, very enthusiastic about the project. It was a little bit casual. I think over time the game industry has become a lot more structured and a lot more formal, like a lot more corporatized. I think we were at that time, like I think at the cusp when we were moving from more of like the old school, super casual like game development atmosphere uh, into that more structured, like more corporate approach. And I think it was a good balance at the time. I think all the team members that we had were um, super enthusiastic. They were really helpful in uh, teaching young designers like me, like the ropes and how to build things. It was in many ways, I think, a stressful project over time because we were still figuring out the technology, and the biggest hurdle was figuring out how to ship on Xbox. And so, uh, we had to um, figure out our performance and memory constraints, build levels within that, work to the changing tools. And there were times when the tools were very slow or very broken, when we had to kind of step back and dedicate engineering time to fixing things so the process could go smoothly again. And that created tension at various times. I think like having to rebuild some of the levels meant that we were working late at various points in the project. So in some ways it was very hectic and very stressful, but I think it was also amazing just because of the team we had and the IP that we were working on.
Sure. Okay. Um, that kind of leads into my next question, a little bit about the Xbox. I think people have talked about it for years, but they feel like that maybe the project or the game was kind of hurt by the limitations of the Xbox, smaller levels and that kind of thing. I don't know if no swimming areas has anything to do with that too, but I think people always talked about that and wondered that because they're used to the big, the giant levels in Thief 1 and Thief 2, and then they cut back in Thief 3 and had the loading zone.
Yeah. Well, whenever you ship on consoles, you're going to have a different set of limitations. I think it was difficult back then because nobody had worked on Xbox before. It was brand new, and nobody really knew what we were working with. And some of that was just some of it was limitation, some of it was choice. Like we had a full dynamic lighting engine. We had body awareness and much higher degree of uh, geometric detail in the world. So all those things are costly. And it did mean that the levels had to be cut down quite a bit in order to ship. And to give you kind of an idea of the scope, I think in our first draft, when we started building missions right when I got there, I think around the year 2000, we were still adding a lot of detail in brushwork because that's the way that we'd always done in Dromed. And I think our earliest drafts of the missions had like over 2,000 brushes altogether. And the ones that we shipped with at the end of the project were usually somewhere between 250 and 300. That's the difference. And so some of that was natural reduction as we got more art. Like we could simplify our brushwork a lot and incorporate more instanced static meshes and more art detail. But a lot of it was driven by the technology, where we really had to cut things down to size and go with those smaller levels.
Um, for you as a real Thief fan coming from the community, um, did you have like some kind of feeling that maybe um, the perception of the fans might be critical, I would say?
Sure. Anytime that you're introducing changes into a known universe, you're always running that risk, But you don't want to stagnate as well. Like there were a lot of hopes that Thief 3 would push the franchise forward and rope in a whole bunch of new fans in addition to the ones that already loved it. So you have to take risks to do that. So I think the best thing that we had going for it, though, is that there were so many Looking Glass people like at the studio. Like the project was run by Randy Smith, and we had Emil and Lulu and Warren and a lot of people who were at Looking Glass previously to help maintain the vision and drive the project. And because the technology was new and there were so many things to figure out, there were features that were cut or had to be prioritized. For example, there were rope arrows in the early version of the game, but the amount of effort that would have taken to complete them and add them in, compared to the climbing gloves, which did a similar function. A decision was made to like, hey, let's put all of our efforts into the climbing gloves, because they're very similar. The same with water. Like, we wanted to have swimming water at the time, but it's just a matter of cost. It's not because we didn't want to have those features, just because we have to prioritize what's most important. And I know that some of those decisions were controversial, but I think there's a lot of things. But I think for one, that's always the case, and for two, like it's always you have to focus on what's most important for the game.
Yeah, and I think the goal of moving the franchise forward and inviting, well, at least inviting new fans, I think that certainly worked. I mean, new people came, and Thief Deadly Shadows was probably their very first introduction to the Thief universe, especially for those who are more console users and not much of PC gamers. Um, I know I've met a few people over the years that their first introduction to Thief was Thief Deadly Shadows, and they later went on to check out Thief 1 and 2 and fan missions and everything like that.
Yeah, and I'm really happy that the critical reception for the game was still generally positive. I think it's still sitting at an 85 Metacritic, which is
Yeah.
which is good.
Yeah, I remember. I can't remember what magazine it was. I think it might have been EGM, maybe. Back in the day when it first came out, and I remember I think my mom used to like to read that magazine too, just because the writers were funny. Um,
Mhm.
and I remember they wrote an article about Deadly Shadows or whatever, and it seemed like I remember my mom's impression was their negative opinions of it was that it seemed to be too hard with like which I took as a
Yeah,
compliment myself at that time. I was like, ah, it's standard games journo. But yeah.
yeah, that's funny. But yeah, I was very excited about the more kind of city aspects of Thief Deadly Shadows. I think that was one of the biggest contributions overall to the vision, was to have these consistent environments in the city where you would go in and be able to revisit them and rob some of the buildings and ally yourselves with the Hammerites or the pagans, and then branch
Yeah.
off and do these missions that are little bits of story. So I think nowadays with if we had today's technology to redo it, I think it would be much more of an open world game. And I think there were a lot of ambitions moving in that direction back then. It was just figuring out how to fit all that together within the technology at the time, and still make a coherent experience that fit within the Thief universe.
So that's what we need. We need to have somebody pick up Thief Deadly Shadows, reboot of just Thief Deadly Shadows and have you be the lead guy on it and just redo it with today's like engine technology and everything.
Sure, if you have $50 million, I'll do that for you.
I'll get that right. I'll
Imminently.
get that right away.
No problem.
All
Maybe
right.
Rob, with your new YouTube channel, you can earn that money.
No, yeah, sure.
Yeah, the podcast money isn't that good, so I'm sorry. But I'm always saying that no matter what anybody would do, because now Embracer Group bought up the rights to Thief and whatnot, and people are, of course, now talking about like, oh yeah, maybe they can do a reboot or whatever. And I'm convinced that no matter what will be done, the original fans will never be satisfied, because I think that they are so stuck, and I'm including myself. We are so stuck to the feeling of the original games, the whole movement and how everything works. I think some people even complained about mental technology with New Dark and stuff like that. I think they can never be satisfied, because, of course, technology evolved, everything evolved, and so things will be different. I think for most of the hardcore fans, they will be like, no, I play another inverted Manse, another time.
Yeah, it's always tough, but I think the reality is that fans don't necessarily always know what they want. You have to present them with something spectacular, and if it evokes the feeling of the original and enough, and has the things that they care about, then I think they will come on board. But there's always isolated people who attach themselves to a particular feature or whatnot, and it's impossible to please everybody. But I think that's not a reason not to do it. It just means that you have to be confident in making a new product, and willing to accept that it might be for 99% of the people and not 100%.
I think maybe
Well
you have
said.
some
Well said.
experience with that, because you were at Hunger 13, and I'm pretty sure you were involved in the Mafia games.
Yeah, I worked on Mafia 3 and the Mafia remake, and I spent several years on an unannounced project there, which was unfortunately canceled, but I did ship a couple of the Mafia games. So the Mafia remake was really interesting in particular because it was a literal translation of the original Mafia that came out in the early 2000s. And for the most part, I think we got it mostly right, and people were very happy. But there were still people who complained about specific features. I remember reading like one user review on Metacritic, and I was like, why'd they move the camera to over the shoulder instead of being right in the center over the head the way they did in the original? You're like, well, have you played a game in the last 15 years? I don't know.
I think the worst part, but that we will go back to Deadly Shadows. I just wanted to say, like, so how it is to please fans from an old series or game. Of course, Mafia 1, I love it. It's one of my favorite games of all time. But of course, you cannot redo that today because it had so many tweaks and quirks. But the worst thing was Paulie, because Paulie in the original was so amazing, and I think the guy that was casted or how he was written was not Paulie, and I love Paulie, and that was a shame, because the game in general, in my opinion, was great.
Oh, well, sorry you feel that way, but
for me, it was like he was. No, I don't know. Yeah, I know that it will be hard for you to answer. But I loved Mafia 3, one of my favorite games as well. Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah, awesome.
I just replayed it this last year. I know it's very repetitive, but I like it. I really love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a whole discussion we could have on the design philosophy of Mafia 3 that I would love to have at some point in time, but it's probably beyond the scope of this podcast.
Exactly. So, Mike, you had one last question with the sneaky upgrade, right?
Yeah, well, we were just kind of talking about remaking Deadly Shadows. I think it's probably more likely like going to be a fan-based project, but there's a patch where they combined the levels, so there's no loading zones. I just wondered if you'd ever played that version of the game.
I have never played it. I've heard about it, and I'm very curious about it. So that seemed like a very ambitious, really cool mod that someone did. So at some point, I will definitely check that out.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
it definitely changes
Yeah.
things for sure.
Yeah.
Yep. I
Um,
actually can't. I once reinstalled Thief Deadly Shadows and forgot to install the upgrade. And then I was like, damn. And then I remembered, yeah, the original, there were those blue foggy things where you have to transition into the next part. And I totally forgot, thanks to Sneaky Upgrade, that it was in there. Yeah, that's something I'm really thankful for, the Sneaky Upgrade.
It definitely does affect how you play the levels for sure.
Mhm.
I
And
can't remember. Like in the old version, could you just run into like a blue cloud to avoid an AI, and would they not be there when you came back through again, or
No,
how
I
did that
think
work?
it's saved, right? It was, didn't it
Yeah,
stay in the status, the state you left?
it did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, could not remember.
And I remember when I bought the game on day one. I was so excited. I think I even skipped some school lessons just to go to the market and grab it. I pre-ordered it, and then of course I had that German problem because I was going to the counter and it was like, "Hey, I reserved Thief, Deadly Shadows," and of course the guy was like, "What thief?" He didn't know how to write it, so he had to check, where he could pick it up, and so I, had to spell it's like THIEF, and then I went home with my bike and installed it, and I was pretty bummed by that moment when I came up to that cloudy thing and I was like, what is that? Is that some magic going on? And yeah, and then I realized, and it was a real bummer even back in the day. But have you on which missions have you been working on the game? So St. Edgar's, we know.
Yeah, I worked primarily on St. Edgar's Cathedral, which is the Hammerite intro, on the Keeper Compound, which is the big Keeper mission in the middle of the game, and on the Old Quarter city mission. And then, as is typical, I did some bug fixing and some polish on a bunch of the other levels in the game. So uh, many of the ones throughout, like South Quarter and the Pagan intro, and a few of the other ones as well. But those were my primary three. Oh,
Hmm.
and the catacombs under Old Quarter as well.
Okay.
Like Thief Deadly Shadows, like as much community flack as it's gotten over the years. I mean, it still is a true Thief game. Like it's it like the atmosphere, the art, everything is there. Like
Voice.
and I've had there are special feelings I've gotten that I got when I played Thief Deadly Shadows the first time, especially that just were very Thief, like a very great. I knew like even with engine limitations and the console had how things had to be smaller. Like it's still the atmosphere is great. We have the same composer. I
Yeah,
still listen to
soundtrack.
the yeah I still listen to the soundtrack when I'm want inspiration now. Like it truly is it is a really good Thief game.
And the
Like
story, I would say.
yeah, the story is great. Yeah, everything like the atmosphere, the story, everything is really great, and it's very Thief. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah,
That's. I'm sorry, go
I'm
on.
I was just going to say I'm really grateful that we got Terry and Eric Brocious back and Laura Baldwin and Randy working with Terry on the story. I think they did a great job. So I was really happy that I got to work with a lot of that old Looking Glass Studio crew in making the game.
And Daniel Tron was with his company working on the cutscenes and stuff, which I
Yeah,
think also added to the atmosphere.
And
yeah,
he voiced
Um,
absolutely.
and he did his customary guard voice too for it, which was very comfy. Hearing that, like when I when I fired it up and I wasn't sure what to expect, and one of the very first guards has that familiar voice,
yeah,
and I was just yeah, that was great. That was a great feeling.
I didn't have that, of course, because I
Oh yeah,
was
that's right.
before playing the games on German, and Thief Deadly Shadows only came out with English voice acting. Um,
Yeah.
and for me, of course, I didn't have that moment. But wasn't Daniel Tron? He was the prison boss, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well. Yeah,
yeah,
he did a few. Yeah.
yeah. Um,
Yeah. It's
but
funny, the thing that I miss the most, and this is such a small thing, but I really miss the loot sound from Thief 1 and Thief 2, and that was a decision
yeah,
like that Randy made where he wanted to change the loot sound. I was like, no, that's the most perfect sound in the world. It's such a small thing, but
Oh, with
that's my
sneaky
most
upgrade, you can get the old one back.
nostalgia thing. Yeah, I think
yeah,
it makes it.
yeah, Mike just said that in the sneaky upgrade you can get the old one, and it's true. It's like the original Deadly Shadows sound is like a bad remix of the
Mm,
original, I would say.
mm, mm,
But it's too soft somehow. I know, but yeah, that's correct. Um, but still, I would say Deadly Shadows was a great game, and I think when you played it in 2004, of course, you have a different view on it than now with all the knowledge behind the technology and stuff. I didn't have that. For me, it was just a thief game, and I liked that the graphics are now good.
mm.
And that you can look at the wall and the stones are, really had, it wasn't flat, and it was really impressive. Of course, looking now at it is like, okay, it had some limitations, but still, it's a great game. And yeah, I love the story. In my opinion, it's the best because I felt more involved in it. It felt more personal.
Mhm.
And what I really love, and I think that the city aspect of that with that hub level um, was adding to this because w- at one point you find this readable where the hack is mentioned, and you don't pay much attention to it, or at least I didn't, and that the hack later becomes the main villain was like a really cool
Really
thing.
great villain. Really great villain.
Yeah.
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 But the way she was
Jamal.
introduced was so cool with that, just the little I think it was that detective, and he was living
Ins-
in the
yeah.
cradle,
Inspector
and
Drept.
yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, that was so cool because I read it and was like, that would be a cool story, but I didn't think that this will turn out like that.
We always knew that creepy little girl from the other games was gonna be actually creepy.
Mhm.
Laurel, I think her name was.
Yeah, that was a great decision. Yeah, it was cool.
So there's one question from one of our community members, Plutonia. I know the golden scales are in Deadly Shadows, but were there any other ways that you were able to integrate Thief 2X references into Deadly Shadows or vice versa?
No, there was never officially anything from Thief 2X and Thief 3. I think there was, Thief 2X was not considered canon, and I'm sure there were legal issues and things as well where they couldn't reference it directly. So the short answer is unfortunately no, but it was very much in my heart and in the heart of some of the other designers, I think, as we were making the game.
And a random intruder, maybe a random Teffer, would like to read that out.
Yeah. So I remember back on Daniel's podcast that I think he talked a little bit about this, or I think I remember seeing some forum posts about it over the years. But I know that before Looking Glass Studios closed its doors, they had sort of a plot for the next game written out, and I think they even talked about having a city hub mechanics and everything that they were going to do. Um, do you have any information on the Lost Thief 3 plot or gameplay mechanics? And if so, like, was any of that utilized in Deadly Shadows?
I don't really. I remember hearing that they had some basic outlines from Looking Glass Studios, and I want to say I think it was similar, like where Gamal was still the villain, and we still had this idea of the open city sections. But I don't remember any of it directly. It was the same people involved. We had the same uh, designers and writers, so I'm sure it was just iteration, like over time. Like typically with any given game, like the mission structure and the story and the dialogue like changes a million times between the beginning drafts and the time that you ship. So I don't remember anything particularly noteworthy about it other than it just evolved over time.
Sure, sure. And Random Intruder has another question. And is that did you play or have an opinion on the Thief mobile game that was implemented a few years back?
No, I never played it. Did you guys? Did you like it?
I
Was
didn't
it
know
the
it
one that was
existed.
like the 2D like side-scrolling one? I don't think I ever played it. I don't think I ever played it.
I did some while ago, and I actually had to install like a an emulator that emulated a phone from back in the days, and then I could play it. It was really badly because you could only click. You had like a Nokia interface with the buttons, and you could only click on the buttons with the mouse. So it was a really strange experience. But yeah, it was this 2D. It actually captured the style of Thief Deadly Shadows very very well. It came out at the same time. I know that. But yeah, it was a mobile game from back in the days. So it was you could hide in a dark corner. So you went up to a dark place and then you pressed, I don't know, 8, and then and the guard could pass.
Hmm.
I think there was some fan game, a flash game or something that was inspired by Thief, which had like, I think we had that in many games actually in 2D stealth. I think Mark of the Ninja is a good example. Um,
Yeah,
that,
I
that
think it's such a great franchise and such a great name, like just the name Thief, that there's a lot of opportunities uh, for broadening out the franchise in various ways. Like at one point in time, I remember there was even brief talk about a movie for Thief, but the audience has always been a little bit too narrow. But I hope that Square Enix continues to do something with it, and we see some version of Thief in the future.
it's not Square Enix anymore. It's now Embracer Group bought it.
Oh, did they? I
Yep.
didn't know that.
Last year they bought it. They bought I think most of the Western studios from Square Enix for I think 300 million or something.
Huh.
Um,
Bargain.
and yes,
Interesting.
so now the IPs like Tomb Raider and stuff like that. And now there's like talks that now Embracer sold the rights to Amazon from Tomb Raider for the series and the TV show, I think. But yeah, let's see. But they are more. So I think are you familiar with the Embracer Group,
Uh,
David?
no, only in name.
They are a Swedish conglomerate, I think, of investors, and they buy a lot. They have so much under their hood, actually, but it's mostly like double A, more like that. So maybe we can expect a double A Thief game in the future.
Oh,
Um,
it's fascinating.
Thief
but
movie would be cool. A Thief
yeah,
movie would
a
be
B
cool.
movie, right?
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
starring Nicolas Cage would play Garrett, of course, as the community has said.
That's
At least
awesome.
Wow.
maybe like
Not getting
maybe like
down.
a younger Nicolas Cage anyway. Like because
Mm.
I think people have like shown pictures of side by sides of the Thief Gold box art with
Yeah.
the cover of like Snake Eyes or something, and it does actually look uncannily similar. But
The DH to Nicolas Cage, that would be great.
yeah,
Oh
with
no.
with
Yeah.
Stephen Russell doing the voice instead,
Mm.
obviously. So he'll have to.
Imagine that. There should be a young Garrett played by an old Nicolas Cage, voiced by an old Stephen Russell.
Yes.
Um,
It could be
yeah,
done.
and then in a B movie quality. Amazing. I'm so much looking forward to that. Um, I made a mistake. I just realized because there have been 2 questions for Inverted Manse and Cult of Resurrection, which I didn't copy in the document to that section. So, Eminel, I'm really sorry, but of course we uh, will ask those questions. Are you fine with that, David, to go back to those?
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Eminel, but I'm just an amateur. So Eminel, first question was both Cult of Resurrection and The Inverted Mans featured deeply hidden and abandoned locations. What was your main inspiration in capturing the atmosphere of desolation inherent to these places?
I think I've always just liked horror as a genre in books and in games and in film. And I really enjoyed like the Haunted Cathedral and Return to Haunted Cathedral and the original Thief, and I just thought that would be a good jumping off point to build fan missions in, both because of the atmosphere and because uh, with horror often less is more, so I wouldn't have to worry about populating the spaces with tons of NPCs, for example. I could make something that was isolated and creepy and ambient and build the atmosphere from there.
Was it back in the days already this divide divided community? Like some were more like, yeah, Thief 1 and with all the dark themes, and the others were like more like into Thief 2 with all the more friendlier and better looking places?
I don't know. From what I remember, I think Thief 2 had the better missions, and Thief 1 had the better atmosphere, and that seemed to be the general consensus among the community. And a lot of people miss the undead missions in Thief 2. That's just
That's
what I remember.
that's pretty much still the that's still the consensus.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's a
pretty much.
never-ending story. But I can understand. When I replayed Thief Gold, I could see why people like it. And I don't know if Thief 2 missions in general are better. I think it just has 2 or 3 big highlights.
Definitely been a resurgence of original Thief missions. It's just the the texture set and the motif and everything. People are making more Thief Gold missions than
Non-colored lighting.
yeah.
Mhm.
And the second question from Eminel, the README of the Inverted Manse mentions many sleepless nights under the build time section. How did you approach the practical organization of work on your early? I think you already answered that before. Did you have a consistent schedule dedicated to Dromod, or did you work mostly when you were inspired?
I worked daily whenever I had time. Like in the beginning, I think I was building Inverted Mans like right when I got back from my teaching job overseas, and I work largely like late at night. And game development in a tool set has always been something I can do daily. Like I don't get burned out as easily working on that as I do necessarily on other things. So I usually just work several hours a day. And I didn't so much have daily goals, but I did have uh, goals for myself over a period of time. Like, I wanted to have a first draft within like a month, and then uh, make sure that I'd released it within, I think, like 3.5 months of the time when I started to the time that it was finished and out to the community. So more just like long-term goals that I tried to hit.
Okay, but yes, but you already worked like kind of professionally on it, right? When I got that right, because I think others are more like the feeling, but you seem to be like very committed to that.
Yeah, it was important. I guess just from an implementation standpoint to build it, quickly and efficiently, and just make sure it was a labor of love and keep working on it. Yeah, stay dedicated to it. Sure.
Okay. So now we will come to the last section of this podcast, and these are the general questions. I think I'll make the random intruder, and then it's Mike's and Rob's part to shine again. Random intruder asks, "What do you
So
think
much
of
pressure.
other?" um, what do you think of other clone thief games like Filter and Gloomwood and Fallen Aces?
Um, I, I think it's fascinating. I'm really happy that Thief continues to inspire even current games like that, like out today. Uh, I think it depends. Filter is interesting because um, it very much attempts to recreate the Thief experience, like kind of the hardcore Thief experience, because I think there's no save points and there's no combat. It just kind of gives you a noir setting with the same kind of mechanics, hiding in shadow and avoiding guards and hiding bodies and stealing things. And I think it's cool that it's out there. It's definitely for uh, kind of a narrow section of players who really enjoy that core Thief experience. I think Gloomwood and Fallen Aces, to a lesser extent, they have more unique settings. Like Gloomwood has the very gothic, like Victorian fantasy setting, which I think is super cool, and Fallen Aces is more like kind of a cartoony noir, which is really unique. Um, so yeah, I think it's cool. I would recommend them for anybody who plays Thief.
I've never played any of them, so yeah, I'll have to look. I've seen a little bit of Gloomwood because people here have been kind of raving about it, and I know that the developer was a big fan of Thief, so I've been meaning to check it out, but I haven't yet. I know Alex has played a little bit streams of it, so I'm kind of excited to try it out at some point.
Yeah, the thing with Filter is with a hardcore experience because we had Johan Jeppe, the creator, on our podcast, and he just said when we talked about the safe game or missing safe game feature, he was just like, yeah, because creating safes is hard.
Exactly. Yeah, it is a feature.
Yeah, but I think it actually added to the game.
Mhm.
Yeah, and Gloomwood is amazing. Fallen Aces I have played actually, but Gloomwood should be on every Thief fan's map as well. So Rob, your
Yeah.
time again.
Okay. I just have a couple questions here. The first one you've kind of answered a little bit, but I guess I'll reframe it a little bit. I know you said you haven't kept up with the thief community as much over the past few years. Um, have you played any newer fan missions that have come out over the past few years? Or do you remember maybe the newest one you played? Um, and if you have, do you have a favorite or?
I've favored fan missions from back in the day, but I haven't played in a number of years. In fact, I think the last really big project I played, I think, was probably Calendra's Legacy, like many years ago. So, and unfortunately, no, I haven't. I've always kind of meant to go back, but it's something
Gotcha.
that I'll have to get back to.
We can send you
Yeah.
some suggestions.
Sure.
Definitely. Marble
Inverted
Man and
Mans is amazing.
yeah, Inverted Man's the standard. Don't know if you've ever heard of that one.
It'd
Um,
probably be like new if I played it again, to be honest.
Marble Man has a pretty good. He's a member of the community he was pretty new. He didn't actually find out about Thief until the 2014 game came out, and that actually caused him to go seek out the originals, and now that's all he plays basically, or like the old Thief games, even though he started out with the 2014 reboot, which is
Hmm.
kind of cool.
You really want to start mentioning all the great authors now?
But he has a good video for newcomers to the community and with recommendations on what to play, and of course T2X is like is front and center on that one. um all right, and then the next question would be uh oh, you need to take a break real quick.
Yep.
I
Yep.
will.
I'll be right back.
I
Okay,
will
no
name
problem.
during that time. I will just name some other great authors, or I would just advise you go into our playlist and see our guests. And you have a small amount of great authors, but of course there are way more from back in the days. Yeah. What is Next doing there? Next is in the chat. Should I write Next Get Out?
I was going to say that.
Yeah, just next get out.
What NPTYT?
No
Take your
problem.
time.
Talk to you. Oh, take your time. Oh yeah.
What the fuck?
Oh, Rain's on a break, so that's why he said that.
I'm assuming he's joking around here.
Yeah,
He's
I
joking.
know, but it's even stranger when he's just in the chat. So yeah, so we have a chat, of course, for the listeners. I won't cut that out. Where they can tell if they need a bathroom break or something like that. And Rain is now, or David is now gone for a minute, and Next just randomly writes in the chat.
Actually,
No problem, take your time.
Yeah, David kind of like Nex and David have similar voices and cadences. Actually, they kind of remind me of each other a little bit. I'm not sure why, but
Can you see the name change to Next?
yeah.
Okay. Oh,
Wow,
okay.
getting nasty.
Okay,
Okay.
so David is back.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
David, ignore this guy in the chat. It's one of our standard participants, and I don't know why he answered here.
He's just being
Hey,
silly.
sure.
Okay.
And his name isn't Idiot, but I just changed it.
Right. So my next question was besides like game development, what other projects do you have that you like to do if you have time? Are there any other hobbies or things that you like that you're passionate about? Like, what do you enjoy? what do you enjoy doing? Like that's in your spare time.
So my biggest hobby, I guess, right now is I like to write horror books. So I've released a couple over the years through small presses and self-pub. So I still do that in my spare time. So still like to write.
Would you mind sharing the titles and where we can find those?
Sure, you can find them on Amazon. And my first book was called The Ashless, which was kind of a political thriller meets horror novel. I wrote a historical horror novel called The Devil's Mistress. And most recently, I have a novella called The Maker's Box, which I released last year. And a couple stories here and there, but those are the big ones.
Or maybe you can send me some links later, then I can put them in the description under the podcast.
Yeah,
Um,
that would be awesome.
yeah, I think for
Cool.
everybody.
I'm a big reader, so I would look forward to checking those out.
I
Cool.
like it that because Pura also is still
Yeah.
writing novels, and
Yeah.
that's really
I've
cool
got
that you
his-
guys have things in common.
Yeah, I've got copies of Pura's novels actually.
Ah,
He's- you
so you will have a buyer for yours soon, David.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
Well, thank you.
Pura
It's
was
great,
definitely Go ahead. Sorry.
I think a lot of designers like to write, like storytelling is a good transition, like into game development, because so much of what we do is really thinking about how the player experiences the game and how to tell those stories. So it is a really cool hobby that kind of ties loosely into into my career.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's great, man. That's like that's my favorite part of games is the story as well. Like that's the most important part to me. The other parts are important too, but that's the part that keeps me interested. Is I want to read about the characters and their interactions and the world and the lore and everything. That's my biggest interest.
yeah,
Cool.
and this is how we get our guests actually, that we promise them some free advertisement during the episode. No, I'm kidding.
Doesn't hurt.
No, but I think I'm pretty sure that many of the TAFers in the community are actually sharing same interests here and there, and they might be very interested in stuff like that. And yeah, if we can open your horizon, guys, then here you go. So the links will be in the description. So I think Mike, you can go on with your questions, right?
Let me take a look here.
No
I think some of these
pressure.
I think we covered most of these, but I did want to know your opinion on Thief 2014, if you have one.
I
I
do.
know it's
I did play
it's
it
the
back in the
first
day.
Thief game that really had nothing to do with anybody. Like at least Deadly Shadows had some old Looking Glass people, but I think Thief 2014 was pretty much not connected at all to any of the
Just
previous games.
let him answer freely without any suggestions.
Feel free, go ahead. I'm ready. Go ahead.
There were a lot of interesting things about the 2014 Thief. In general, I did not like it as much. I think it felt a little bit hollow for various reasons. I think the team behind it was very, very skilled, because I think there's so many little things in the game that I really appreciated, like just little things, like the way that you climb through the world, the way that you would steal loot and be able to crack safes and like feel around paintings, the look of Garrett's hands, like all those little details were I think really nice additions and felt like right at home. But I think where it missed the mark for me was really at the high level, where I think the story, the overall kind of mission structure was a bit bland, and I think I really missed the conflict inherent in the world with the Hamrites and the pagans. And I don't think Garrett had enough personal stakes in the world. I think the missions kind of felt like they just kind of flowed from one to the next without enough character development there. So there are definitely things about it that I would change. I think mechanically, I think it was fine. Like, some of the level design was quite good. But all the mechanics from a systems point of view are very familiar. Like you still had your water arrows and your moss arrows, and the rope arrows were a lot more limited. I'd really be looking, if I were going back to the Thief universe and creating a new Thief game, I'd really be looking at ways to kind of expand on what those core mechanics are and improve things a bit. So I it's it's hard if you're a fan of the franchise. I think it's worth playing, but it's not where I would start as an entry point. I think the originals are still the best by a good margin.
Yeah, I think it's a good game. I almost wish it weren't Thief. Like like if it was just its own thing by itself. But yeah, I totally agree with basically everything you said. Everything. Yeah,
Yeah, they
well said.
should have named it Burglar, and then have gone with the Norman Druid stuff like Barrett and stuff like that, and then yeah. Thank you, David, for your answer, because I know for people that work in the industry, it's always hard to criticize games from other teams. So yeah, thank you for your opinion on that. Yeah, Mike.
So I guess this is a good sequel to that question, but what do you think the advantages and disadvantages would be if a new Thief game were to be developed by a smaller studio as opposed to a AAA developer?
That's a really interesting question. I think there are advantages and disadvantages to both. I think if I were looking at developing a new Thief game, I would ask myself two questions, and the answers might be different depending on the size and scope of the studio. I think the first question would be who the game is for, and the second question would be what's the unique hook that a new Thief game is going to have, or a new stealth game is going to have. So one of the most fascinating things about AAA development in the last, I guess, like 12 or so years has been an understanding of market demographics. And all the big publishers, excuse me here, all the big publishers have their own categorizations and their own proprietary way that they categorize gamers. But basically, they've come to appreciate the fact that people play games for different reasons now. There are some people who are very heavily invested in single player story experiences. Some people who really enjoy getting involved in the meta game, like RPG mechanics and finding all the collectibles and things like that. There are others who want a really immersive experience, and then you have like multiplayer players who enjoy playing casually with their friends. Others who are esports players. And various other types, like depending on how you categorize those. And Thief is really interesting, immersive sims in general, because they balance that really immersive experience, like putting you in the game, but also bringing in some of the light RPG mechanics and things like that. And then there's also a story. So I think the first question is really what you would really emphasize. Do you want to create a game that leans more heavily into the player power curve and those RPG mechanics, or do you want to create a simpler, more core experience with stealth? Maybe like a highly polished, like Last of Us stealth game or something like that. So that would inform part of it. And then the other question would be, what is your unique hook? And Thief, from a systems point of view, I've always considered Thief's greatest strength to be the fact that it's about creating stealth space. You go into these environments where it's really hostile, where you have like a loud like tile floor, and you have a lot of torches, and this place is populated by guards. And then with your tools, there are different ways to play, of course, but largely, like the systems wise, it steers you towards kind of cleaning the space, where you're putting out the torches and you're creating these soft stealth spots and you're hiding bodies and things like that. From a systemic point of view, where you have like all these options and these ways to do that in various ways. So I think if you're going to create a new Thief game, or a new stealth game in general, I think that would be something really interesting to look at. If you still have these core tools or something that's equivalent, how do we make this core stealth experience even better? Like, how do we give you more tools to kind of go through and approach these spaces like that? I always think that's really fascinating to compare the different kinds of stealth games and what they've leaned into. Like, Dishonored is a really fantastic franchise, but I think one of the reasons it's fantastic is because it's not Thief, because it leans very heavily into its movement. You have these very vertical spaces, very smooth mantling and blinking, and crawling through vents and all the things that really emphasize moving around a space instead of kind of cleaning it the way that you would in Thief. And then like something like Splinter Cell, like relies heavily on tools and gadgets, and Metal Gear is a much more kind of puzzly experience that's based around very specific mechanics like hiding in lockers and things like that. So if I were going to make a Thief game, I might answer those questions a little bit differently depending on the size and scope of my team. Like how many AI programmers can I have to really focus on the AI? How many tool programmers can I have and designers can I have to really focus on the tools? But those are the kind of questions that I think I'd be asking myself if I were going to reboot. And I think if I were going with a double A experience with a smaller budget, then I'd probably lean into a more core Thief experience and really make sure that the mechanics that we did have were really stellar. And if I had a larger budget, then I'd probably try to support more different gameplay types and maybe a little bit more combat the way that Dishonored did, for example. So all those are really fascinating things to think about, I think, if you're ever to return to it.
That was a very interesting point or answer, and you can feel that you, of course, have some industry point of views on that. So thank you very much. That was very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, talking about the game development process as a whole and the business end is a whole other thing, but it's always something that's kind of in the back of my mind.
Yeah, but it's really interesting because if you just ask, someone who's just in quotes a modder, or just someone like me who has done anything, and you would get totally different answers, And but of course you always have to consider those industry things that make it work. So that was very interesting, actually. And Mike, last question.
Yeah, I just wanted to know what some of your favorite stealth games were, any era, actually. But you kind of just named off a few, but wonder if there's others.
Yeah, interestingly, I'm not a hardcore stealth player. I think a lot of my favorite games are not stealth games. I think if I had to choose another favorite game that was similar to Thief, it would be Dishonored 2. I love the Dishonored games. I think the second game was stronger in a lot of reasons. For a lot of reasons, I think, particularly for the level design and the creativity that they were able to put into the game there. So maybe I'll answer, I guess, some of my favorite games in general, and not just stealth. I think Thief is still at the top. I would put there's quite a variety. I think I would put Half-Life 2. I would think I would put Dark Souls, probably the 2018 God of War, Dishonored 2, as I mentioned. The BioShock games, like all three of them, I really like. And depending on how far back you go, like I could even name, Nintendo games like Castlevania 2. I think is the first open world action RPG, and I still like it to this day.
Simon's Quest, really?
Yes, I know not everybody loves that game, but for me, I thought it was great, and not because it was challenging, but because just the structure of the open world and being able to explore everywhere and power up your character was not something that you'd really done a whole lot until that point.
I think the angry video game nerd didn't do the game a favor.
Maybe. So I don't know. Quite a variety of games, and I think for multiplayer, probably the Battlefield games. Probably Battlefield 1942 is still my favorite multiplayer game of all time.
The original one.
Yeah, way back. In fact,
I remember that. Yeah.
It's funny because my introduction to that was while working on Thief 3, and I remember very distinctly playing that with my fellow designers at Iron Storm Austin. So I think that's why it left such an impression back then.
That was such an impressive game back in the days with this huge maps, and you can fly and ride tanks, and there was that mission where one party started at the ship, right?
Yeah, there are different
Bay, something with Bay, I think it was called. That was so cool, and the music is so iconic, and yeah, I remember it too. And I didn't have internet; I just played with bots.
Yeah, we take technology for granted nowadays, but I remember back in the day, with that game, I remember standing on the deck of an aircraft carrier, which is a huge, like enormous ship, and it was bombed by a bunch of planes, and it started sinking underneath me and my team, and there'd never been anything like that in any multiplayer game before. So now we're seeing like destruction and dynamic environments taken to entirely new levels these days. But back 20 years ago, that was a brand new thing. So it's very cool.
Yeah, and destruction doesn't make necessarily better games, as we've seen with the last Battlefield installment, I think. Um, yeah. But you, I think one of the best stealth game is Mafia 3, of course. I actually liked the stealth approach. Of course, it was very systemic, but still, I liked it to try to sneak through the Mafia 3 areas and
Oh,
try to
cool.
take out the guards. I really,
Yeah.
that is a game I could talk for hours, because first of all, I like the approach that you have. The character, that he's black, and then you are settled in that time where racism was a huge thing, and I think it was very brave to build that and to image that, and yeah, I really liked the game and the cars, and yeah, it was really cool.
Sounds like I should probably play it. I should probably play it at some point.
Yeah, it is very repetitive in some parts. Of course, it's sometimes you have to clear an area, of course, and it's basically the same. But on the other hand, you can have different approaches. Do you want to go in, kill everybody with a gun, or do you want to wait at a door and whistle, and then wait until they come, and then you take them out?
Sure.
But yeah, I think it was a really cool game with a lot of things that many games don't try or are not brave enough to do.
Yeah, if you get a chance to work on that game, most of my efforts were spent on the first 90 minutes of the game. The Act One is where I had a lot of focus, but I also worked on a couple of the hideouts, the bathhouse and the jazz club Cistern, which is a very thief-like underground location. But I did not work on the open world that game. In fact, I really kind of wanted to, and I moved into more of a world design focus after Mafia 3 because I was so fascinated by the open world design. But the theory behind Mafia 3's open world design was really interesting, and I wish it had been better received, because I think it kind of centered around this big design question, which is when you have an open world game, one of the things that happens frequently is that you lose track of the main story, or you're off doing side missions that feel kind of unfocused. And the original design idea, which was done by our design director, Matthias Wirch at the time, was very ambitious, was that you'd, instead of doing all these side activities, you'd always be playing the game. And so there were 9 districts headed up by these 9 mafia capos, and they all had various activities and these small things that you could do. No matter what you choose to do in the open world, you'd always be taking down one of the bosses. So there would never be this differentiation between the main story and the rest of the game, because you'd always be kind of contributing in some way to the main story. But there were various issues with that, like having all the districts open at the same time kind of felt too open when we put it in testing. So we had to narrow it down to having only a few districts open at a time, which had some other issues, like which meant that you weren't rewarded for exploring the districts that weren't unlocked yet, and so forth. So, but I think in spite of all that, I think the ambition behind it was really fascinating. So I think it's still a great game to play, and if you like stealth, you can definitely take the stealth approach as you move through.
Um, where I know you said that you are doing stuff for an unannounced startup, AAA startup. Is there, and I don't want to take over for Alex, but is there a place, because since we can't know what it is right now, is is there a place that we can follow you to find out, like once you can talk about it, can we know what it is? Like is there a place we can follow you to find out like when that's available?
Let's see. I'm not so much on social media for my game persona. I think though, if you check my LinkedIn account from time to time, I'll be able to post whenever we announce at some point in the future. And whenever we do, I'm sure I'll shout it from the rooftops in some form or another. Uh, so hopefully you'll take notice, just because it will make a splash. But I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, man, but I want to know if I gotta know that it's you that's doing it. You know, it's like
Yeah, I will. I don't know. I'll find a way to notify you so that you can tell people. Yeah.
David, write me an email and then I will tell Rob, and then he's satisfied and that's what he wants.
Okay, will do.
yeah.
I'll make that pledge.
Yeah, I think we can come to an end now. And yeah, we have our average runtime now. So, Mike, Rob, is there anything you want to add?
Well, I just thank you so much, David. It was nice. It was nice talking to you. I definitely listened to your commentary you did with the late Dave Johnson on T2X a few years back. I watched that and listened and really enjoyed it. Thanks you so much for coming on. It's been an honor. I've been a big fan of yours for a long time, and it was glad to finally talk to you. Anybody listening, if you haven't played Thief 2X or Inverted Manse, definitely.
Thief Deadly Shadows.
Oh, well, yeah, that too. If you haven't played any of those, definitely take some time to play it. I wish I could trade places with you and experience Thief 2X for the first time. Like, I'm very jealous of those who are going to play it for the first time because it's incredible and it's just such a big achievement in the community. So thank you so much, David. It's been a real joy for me to talk to you here for a bit.
Yeah, thanks so much. Very glad to be here.
Yeah, and I think Rob already said everything that needs to be said. Yeah, thank you very much. It was amazing. I think you really gave a very genuine and interesting answers with a lot of details, which I really like. And yeah, I think for the Teffers, this is another gem. So yeah, thanks to you, David. Thanks, Rob and Mike, for doing this with me. And
Yep.
thank you guys for listening to it. And
Wait, I did have one more question for you.
Yes.
11th hour. What does sledge and what does RAEN mean, or where did that come from?
Oh yeah, that's interesting.
Sledge was my very, very early name, and that was because I was in a band at the time called Sledge, and that was just my online representation of the band, and that's why I ditched it. It was a little hokey, so I ditched that in general and went with RAEN, which I thought was more representative. But that was just a name, a made up internet name.
I can just see Rob taking notes because Rob also has two bands, as far as I remember.
So what did you do in the band? What was your?
I was originally bass, drums, and vocals, and
Wow.
when we played live, I did bass and vocals with our guitarist, and then we had a drummer friend who joined us to play live gigs.
Is there anything we can find anywhere? If I search for it, can I find recordings somewhere?
I don't think so. I think that all kind of predates the actual YouTube internet era, so I don't think anything has survived other than old CDs here in my office.
But
Well, it's
I
in your
know
office. It's in your office still, so you gotta you must be saving it. You gotta upload it somewhere, man.
I've said too much.
And guys, don't wonder if suddenly someone on the community pops up with the name Marmot. That is Random Taffer.
It's
Naming
like one of a million different people with this. It's hard to choose a band name these days because everything is taken. Everything is taken. Everything. So
Yeah.
Sledge 2X.
that's right. Let's try
Nice.
industrial rock, of course.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so I think now everything was set. Any questions from you guys? Now it's the time. Otherwise, I will close this thing now.
I'm good. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, so thanks for listening. Teffers, bye-bye.
Ha! I'm not following her in there. She's as good as dead anyway.